on how to avoid scams. Fewer has even teamed up with the LA County Department of Consumer Affairs to prosecute would-be scammers. Fines could be up to $1,000 with 1 year in jail for a misdemeanor. Other possible charges could include felony grand theft.
We are issuing a warning. There is a cross-jurisdictional collaboration in place. We are going to hold you accountable.
This is also a priority of my office, and we have investigators that are getting special training.
For more information on free legal services or for the schedule of town hall meetings on immigration, call 213-978-8340. I'm Anna Marcos for LA This Week.
The first town hall meeting on immigration will be held Saturday, January 31st at 10 a.m. at St. Mary's College in South LA. After dozens of tire slashings in the Silver Lake area, residents are demanding action to be taken to catch the vandal. Rasha Goel reports.
We've had 20 incidents of this so far from October 1st to December 2nd, ranging as early as 2 p.m. in the afternoon to 5 a.m. in the morning.
And in response to these incidents of tire slashing, Councilmember Mitch O'Farrell and the LAPD recently took to the streets to show concerned residents 7 new street lights on the 3 streets where the vandalism occurred.
We know that installing lights is not the panacea. Installing lights is not going to solve the crime, but we also know that in neighborhoods that are better lit, crime's greatly reduced.
The councilman worked with the LA Department of Water and Power, which put up the lights in 6 weeks.
Normally, when you put a request in for a utilitarian light through LADWP, it's more like 3 to 6 months. But they understood this was priority for us.
And while the lights may be up, the councilman still suggests residents should be vigilant.
It's really good to get to know your neighbors and to collaborate on public safety issues. You might want to think about forming a neighborhood watch.
Police are also asking more victims whose car tires were slashed to come forward. They believe the more information they have, the sooner they may be able to catch the suspect. I'm Rasha Goel for LA This Week.
Police believe one person is responsible for the tire slashings, and they say only about half the affected residents have filed police reports. Some friendly competition is heating up between LAPD, LAFD, and the Sheriff's Department, and it's all for a good cause. Here's Yana Kay.
LAPD SWAT Sergeant Tim Colamy looks perfectly healthy today, but that wasn't the case almost 20 years ago when his life was hanging in the balance after being hit by a drunk driver, leaving him with severe injuries. And today he's grateful to the American Red Cross.
It saved my life that day, amongst other things, but without that blood, I wouldn't be here.
That's why Colamy now donates blood every 56 days, the minimum wait time between donations, to give back. He's also taking part in the city's 9th annual Battle of the Badges.
This is a great opportunity. I'm a lifelong blood donor. It truly is the gift of life, and I'm very happy to have the Los Angeles Fire Department participate in this great program.
The Battle of the Badges is a friendly month-long competition between LAPD, LA Fire, and the LA County Sheriff Department to see which department can give more blood.
The men and women of public safety come together to do this above and beyond their normal duties.
But you can help too. Anyone can walk into a Battle of the Badges blood drive and give blood. LAPD Chief Charlie Beck says donating not only saves lives, but connects everyone together.
And the gift of life to another is such a great thing. And I will remind you that you never know when you're going to be on the receiving end of some of these donations.
40,000 pints of blood have been collected since the Battle of the Badges competition began 9 years ago. And that means that 120,000 lives have been helped.
Today, we are celebrating our law enforcement and fire partners who are giving lives by saving lives.
This friendly competition also involves other law enforcement and fire departments throughout Southern California. The Red Cross hopes to collect 5,000 units of blood. I'm Yana Kay for LA This Week.
If you like to donate blood, you can visit redcross.org. It's taken close to $500,000 in community block grants, but a new WorkSource Center is now open for business in Boyle Heights, and it promises to bring a brighter economic horizon for residents. Anna Marcos takes us there.
Lots of people out of work and looking for jobs in Boyle Heights. This job fair is just the first step in changing that.
I'm going into engineering and that field, so anything here that with engineering, that'll be a plus for me.
I'm just looking for a job opportunity here. Just any clerical work.
The job fair is part of the grand opening of a new WorkSource Center in Boyle Heights. WorkSource centers aim to connect hopeful job applicants with jobs in growing industries by providing job listings, training, technical help, computer use, and skilled employment specialists.
This particular center is focused in the security industry as well as the solar and green energy industry. Those are the two growth industries and the great good-paying jobs.
And there are more good-paying jobs in store. Northgate Markets, which brings healthy grocery choices into underserved communities, just hired 200 people at its South LA store. And there is a Boyle Heights store as well. And the 6th Street Bridge Replacement Project, one of the largest projects in LA, is recruiting workers.
At the moment, we're looking for trade workers. It could be anywhere from laborers, welders, plumbers, electricians.
This latest Boyle Heights site is one of 17 WorkSource centers in LA.
We have a stellar system to provide job delivery services. We are on the Pacific Rim competing with world markets. We're in a global economy. We have to bring that global economy down into our communities.
We all know when you get a job, that's a joyful moment on many levels. Here in this community, Boyle Heights, El Sereno, Highland Park, CD14, it's going to have a profound effect on people's lives.
For Boyle Heights residents, the job outlook just got a lot brighter. I'm Anna Marcos for LA This Week.
Other agencies that helped secure grants for the project include the Economic and Workforce Development Department, General Services, and the Bureau of Engineering. Longtime California Senator Barbara Boxer posted a video on YouTube announcing she will not run for re-election in 2016. That got tongues wagging about whether our mayor may run. That's This Week in Tweets. In response to all the speculation, Mayor Eric Garcetti first tweeted, "The first thing we should do today is thank Senator Barbara Boxer for being a powerful champion for our city, state, and nation in the U.S. Senate." He then tweeted a pretty emphatic denial of any interest in wanting to fill Boxer's seat. The tweet says, "I love my job and I love my city and I am committed to the work here. I will not run for Senator Boxer's seat." Is that the final word or is it to be continued? We'll just have to watch and see. Around 200 people gathered on a chilly night in San Pedro recently to witness the rebirth of what used to be an eyesore. Gil Reyes takes us to the lighting of the all-new Gaffey Street pedestrian bridge.
3, 2, 1.
With the flip of a switch, a new lighted sign welcomes people to San Pedro.
I think it's fantastic. I appreciate the fact that the bridge is now light and bright and provides a nice entry into the city.
The sign brightens the Gaffey Street pedestrian bridge overlooking the 110 freeway. 1,200 feet of blue LED lights serve as trim, illuminating nighttime strolls with its mellow glow. The now azure archway is a vast improvement from the original dirty bridge, which often drew vandals. The upgrade also serves another purpose.
To kick off the Great Street program that the mayor has launched, naming Gaffey Street as one of the first great streets in the city of Los Angeles.
LA Mayor Eric Garcetti's Great Streets initiative, launched in May, plans to beautify some of the city's main corridors. Gaffey Street is one of them. Making them more bike and pedestrian friendly is part of the plan.
They should be vibrant public spaces for art, for culture, for our families to enjoy. And along with Councilmember Buscaino, as he mentioned, we've started reaching out to the community because we want you to participate.
Perhaps a sign of more improvements to come. On the new Gaffey Street pedestrian bridge in San Pedro, Gil Reyes for LA This Week.
As part of the mayor's Great Streets initiative, 40 streets throughout the city are slated for improvements. No one will likely disagree that the least we can do for those 90 years old or older is to throw them a big celebration. And that's exactly what the city did recently for its senior citizens as a way to pay respect and show gratitude. The Department of Recreation and Parks' annual 90-plus Legacy Luncheon is a tradition honoring the life and works of our city's eldest residents. The Friendship Auditorium was the site of the most recent luncheon held prior to the new year, in which 336 seniors 90 years old and over attended. Virgie Aguilar was one of them.
The secret for me is not being negative. I love people and I like to talk to them, whether I know them or not. Say hi, because I think that is great that we are here so long.
I recognize that it must be our mission to do all we can to nurture our senior community and make sure that you have the resources you need so that you can have the quality of life that you deserve, that you have earned, because you came before all of us.
An appropriate song for this year's theme, Life is a Journey. In the 22 years this luncheon has been held, 29 of the 90-plus honorees have exceeded the age of 100. This year, Miss Virginia Davis, age 107, was crowned queen for the third year.
For being a wonderful citizen, for encouraging all of us to maintain life as you have. Thank you, Virginia.
This is special. This is special. This is Recreation and Parks at its best.
The amount of experience, the lives that you've lived, and the vast knowledge that you must have has got to be incredible, and to have all that in one room is absolutely amazing.
Each year is better than ever. Each year is better than the last year.
And Virgie Aguilar knows where she's going to be next year, right back here on the dance floor, celebrating life and all that it has to offer. General Manager of Rec and Parks, Michael Scholl, says his goal for 2015 is to have the department begin collecting and documenting the stories of our city's senior citizens to pass down to future generations. Saving the environment and saving money. Find out about a limited offer by the LADWP and the reopening of a dog-friendly pocket park. Also earn up to $100+ a day serving as a poll worker. These stories in City Beat. Los Angeles Department of Water and Power customers who currently receive printed LADWP bills and who sign up for paperless billing through ladwp.com/paperless will receive a $10 credit on their next bill. The offer is only for a limited time through the end of June. Once enrolled, customers will receive bill notifications via email. This will reduce paper clutter and help decrease the environmental impact from printing paper bills. LADWP officials say the program is part of an ongoing effort to reduce the department's environmental footprint. Also, by not having to mail a bill, the department also saves money, which in turn saves customers money. The Department of Recreation and Parks celebrated the reopening of the Dorothy J. and Benjamin B. Smith Park on Franklin Avenue. Located in the Hollywood area, the pocket park now includes drought-tolerant plants and trees, decorative single-seat benches, decomposed granite paths, and fixed bag dispensers for dog waste. The park's new design consists of fitness equipment and a trimmed tree canopy to create an inviting pedestrian-friendly setting. Councilmembers Mitch O'Farrell and Tom LaBonge, as well as the Department of Water and Power, all helped to make this project possible. The city clerk's office needs approximately 4,000 poll workers to staff polls for the 2015 municipal elections on March 3rd and May 19th. Poll workers are paid $25 for attending a mandatory training class, as well as a stipend that can range from $80 to $150 for each election day they work. In order to serve as a poll worker, the applicant must be a U.S. citizen and registered voter who will be at least 18 years old on Election Day and is able to speak, read, and write in English. The Election Division is also seeking bilingual poll workers. You can call 1-866-899-VOTE or email clerk.electionpw@lacity.org. A song about Los Angeles has become a YouTube sensation, receiving some 10 million views in less than 2 years. It's also received special recognition from the city. Gil Reyes has more on the Los Angeles song.
Los Angeles, Los Angeles.
It could be the most popular song about our city in all of YouTube. The Los Angeles song is written and performed by LA native Justin Chart. Chart was inspired to write it 2 years ago while hiking through Griffith Park.
My daughter and I around sunset time, and just looking at the complete view, the panoramic view you get there from, the city. And it was just it's a beautiful view. And I just kind of got a feeling.
A deep affection for the city's landscape, history, and creative spirit inspired 5 different versions, including 2 Spanish-language renditions, all from Chart. Together, they've garnered some 10 million YouTube views. That's about 8 million more views than Randy Newman's still very popular I Love L.A.
We are actually at the studio of musician Justin Chart, where you can see some of the other accolades adorned on his wall. 2 city proclamations, one from Mayor Garcetti, the other from Councilman Tom LaBonge, and of course over here, the famous LA Times article.
Chart admits the article penned by Times columnist Steve Lopez helped popularize his song worldwide. He's now courting the city's Department of Cultural Affairs in hopes it can be played at ball games, marathons, and other events.
Sunset state of mind, that's what you'll find right here, oh yeah.
Chart is also working on yet another version of the Los Angeles song, one with some 30 voices representing all of LA's sister cities.
It's going to be huge. We're kind of going to take you through a voyage of all the people who now make Los Angeles their home, who are so grateful and happy to be living here, who've come from all over the world.
In Hollywood, Gil Reyes for LA This Week.
Mayor Garcetti and Councilman LaBonge issued their city proclamations praising the song last summer. There's now an extra place to sit and relax when you visit the Griffith Park merry-go-round. A new bench was recently dedicated to honor a big fan of the carousel, Walt Disney's late daughter. A favorite LA pastime, a treasured childhood memory for many, an iconic piece of LA history. And back in 1940, Walt Disney would regularly bring his daughters Diane and Sharon to the Griffith Park merry-go-round, where he'd watch them from a bench and begin dreaming of building a theme park that later became a reality, Disneyland.
She spoke so highly of the experience that she and her sister had in coming here with her father and enjoying it.
Walt Disney would pay the operator of the merry-go-round extra so that girls could ride and ride and ride, and he would be visioning what gave the world one of the greatest places on earth, which is everything to do with Disney. So you're standing on a very special spot.
Diane Disney Miller passed away in 2013. To honor her memory, the owners of the merry-go-round have dedicated a memorial bench bearing her name.
I asked her if I could have a picture of her on the bench, and she said, "Only if you sit with me." That's the kind of lady she was, and those of you who knew her really understand what a warm and marvelous lady she was.
That original bench where Walt Disney sat was also on display, and while the Griffith Park merry-go-round has long been linked to the Disney lore, for many folks, it's also been an important part of their own family history.
It just comes from my heart. It was a lot of fun. It's just memories from when I was a child.
A place of wonder that on any given day can rival Disneyland as the happiest place on earth. Built in 1926 by the Spillman Engineering Company, the merry-go-round was brought to Griffith Park in 1937. And in this week's list of things to do, we have more information on the iconic Griffith Park merry-go-round if you'd like to pay a visit. Also watching the Classic Film Network on the big screen, and an exhibit featuring the works of teen photographers. If our story on the Griffith Park merry-go-round has inspired you to take a spin, here's some additional information. The merry-go-round is open weekends throughout the year and weekdays as well as weekends only during the summer. The hours are 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. Griffith Park is located at 4730 Crystal Springs Drive. The merry-go-round is located between the LA Zoo and the Los Feliz Park entrance. The carousel boasts 68 horses finely carved with jewel-encrusted bridles and is accompanied by a Stinson 165 military band organ. Whether it was a place you spent your childhood or a place you're now taking your kids, most will agree the merry-go-round at Griffith Park is indeed magical. Go to laparks.org. On Friday, January 16th, you have a chance to see the classic 1976 film Network on the big screen at the LA County Museum of Art, or LACMA. Directed by Sidney Lumet, the film about the future of network news, which produced the catchphrase "Mad as Hell," features Faye Dunaway, William Holden, Peter Finch, Robert Duvall, Ned Beatty, and on and on. Paddy Chayefsky won an Oscar for his Take No Prisoner screenplay. The film will be screened at LACMA's Bing Theater at 9:40 p.m. LACMA is located at 5905 Wilshire Boulevard. Tickets are $3 for Academy members and $5 for the general public. Go to lacma.org to purchase tickets or for additional information. On Saturday, January 17th, you can catch 224 Miles, a show featuring works by Venice Arts teen photographers Leo Martinez, Zinnia Moreno, Chelsea Ramirez, and Mark Tomalin, created during their educational trip to the Grand Canyon. In July, with digital film and video cameras in tow, the 4 advanced study students went on the journey of a lifetime, using their surroundings as artistic inspiration. You can see their works at the exhibit at the G2 Gallery at 1503 Abbot Kinney Boulevard in Venice from 6:30 to 9:30 p.m. Proceeds will support Venice Arts Youth Opportunities Fund. Go to theg2gallery.com, and that's a look at some upcoming things to do. That's going to do it for this edition. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ellen Chang. A reminder that you could catch us online at lacityview.org. You can also follow and like us on Facebook. We'll see you back here next week for more of LA This Week.
We are a winning team, stars and the silver screen. We come from near and far to be with the best. We're Los Angeles, Los Angeles. Sensi and sun, a way of life, the ocean, we're laid back.
A single ember that escapes from a wildfire can travel more than a mile. You can't control where that ember will land, only what happens when it does. Get Fire Adapted now at fireadapted.org.
Don't worry, Patty. This isn't going to hurt me one bit. Hi, I'm Dr. Eric Shapiro in beautiful Encino, and you're watching LA City View, Channel 35. Our city, our channel. Open wide.
Good morning, everyone. Today is Wednesday, January 14th. I'd like to welcome each and every one of you to your Los Angeles City Council. This council meets every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10 a.m., and the public is welcome. Mr. Clerk, I believe we have a quorum. Could you please call the roll?
Blumenfield, Bonner, Buscaino, Cedillo, Englander, Fuentes, Huizar, Carrasco, Correa, LaBonge, Martinez, O'Farrell, Parks, Price, Wesson. 10 members present and quorum, Mr. President.
Thank you, sir. First order of business.
Approval of the minutes.
LaBonge moves, Correct seconds. Next.
Commendatory resolutions for approval.
Blumenfield moves, Buscaino seconds. That brings us where?
Mr. President, there are requests from the Department of Building and Safety and from member to continue items 1D, 1G, and 1I to January 27.
Okay, so without objection, that'll be the order. That brings us where?
Mr. President, that brings us to items 1 through 7. They're items noticed for public hearing.
Do we have cards?
Yes, sir. We have cards on items 1, 2, and 7.
Let's hold those items and vote on the remaining items. Let us open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
Okay, let's continue.
Mr. President, item 8 is an item for which public hearing has been held.
Okay, then members special, anybody want to call us? See none, let's prepare to vote. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
That brings us where?
Items 9 through 16 are items for which public hearings have not been held. A committee report for item 11 has been circulated, and 10 votes are required for consideration.
Okay, so without objection, those items are now before this body. Let us hold item 13. Mr. Buscaino.
11, please.
11 for Mr. Buscaino. Mr. LaBonge.
Yes, I'd just like to ask that our nominees who did such a great job for the Metropolitan Water District call those two specials so they could both give us a very brief report on water and the MWD.
And
Thank you.
those numbers, those items
I think it's 9 and 10, but I don't have my glasses on.
Okay, then we'll hold those.
I know.
Do we have cards?
Mr. President, we have cards on items 9, 10, 11, 13, 14, and 15.
Is there anything left to vote on where it relates to those items?
Yes, sir. Items 12 and 16.
Well, let's have at it. Let's prepare to vote. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
All right, that brings us where?
Mr. President, that takes...
Mr. Parks.
Reconsideration from yesterday's calendar on item 1H. The party was here, did not know the process, and was not able to discuss it with Building and Safety, and we'd like to continue it for 30 days.
Okay, so Mr. Clerk.
Yes, sir. Mr. President, that's Council File 14-0160, sub 409.
Okay, so let's vote on reconsideration. We will allow the clerk to plug it in. Are we ready? Okay, so we're voting on reconsideration of this item. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
Okay, and we wanted to continue this until
30 days.
30 days. Mr. Clerk would put us at what day exactly?
That takes us to February 13, sir.
Okay, Mr. Parks, this will be continued until February 13. Mr. Clerk, where are we now on the agenda?
That takes council to presentations or items called special.
Mr. LaBonge, why don't we begin with a very, very special presentation that will be led by Mr. LaBonge.
Don't do that for boiled eyes. Okay. I'll come in here. That's very good. Mr. President, thank you for earlier joining with this very distinguished group that's visiting us today. Yesterday, you may all recall that it is Korean American Day in the United States. It was declared by Congress in 2003, Mr. Buscaino, and to recognize the great contributions that Korean Americans have done for our city. And over 100 years ago, how many years? 112. 112 years ago, the first immigrant came to the United States. And recently, the great Tournament of Roses and the Pasadena Rose Parade featured that centennial celebration of the Korean American immigrant. And for us in particular, it was at Jefferson in Vermont, which was the first Korean American shop that we know of, a little market down by USC. And over the years, through the entrepreneurship of the Korean American community and the driving force of the women and men of the community, they have transformed the center part of the Wilshire District, and Koreatown is quite now a thriving place and revitalized. I'm so happy today to be here to represent. I started my day in Griffith Park at sunrise, and I was with someone who had never been there, and they couldn't realize how many of our hikers were Korean Americans. And I told them it's Namsung North. Namsung is the great mountain in the center of Seoul. And in the mountains of Griffith Park, you will see hundreds and hundreds of hikers. And on weekends, they volunteer and do great conservation work. But I want to get more to the facts here of this resolution that was signed by our mayor, Mr. Garcetti, as well as Mr. Koretz. And Mr. Koretz, I thank you for that as well. All the members of council, it's so important. This day was chosen because in 1903, 101 pioneer immigrants arrived in Hawaii from Korea, and they worked the fields. Now the Korean American community is nearly 2 million. Los Angeles is the largest Korean American community outside of Korea. And there's 38 countries' largest city outside their own country is Los Angeles. It speaks to the great diversity of Los Angeles, which is so important. Busan in South Korea became our sister city in 1971. Los Angeles and its adjacent cities home to, I said, 700,000. And I'd like to ask the fine councilman of the 1st District, who got stuck in traffic in Koreatown on his way to work today, to join me, if you will, Mr. Cedillo. Thank you, Mr. Cedillo. Give Mr. Cedillo and Debbie Kim, his fine legislative director, a big hand right now. Our area, known as Koreatown, is still the commercial, cultural, and social spiritual hub of the majority of Korean Americans. And as I spoke of this immigration, how important it is, and how special it is, and how the contributions have been so much to all of us. So I have this commendation. We have these folks here, and I want to ask, too, as a representative, speak on this. But first, I want to ask Mr. Cedillo to say a few words. Mr. Cedillo.
Mr. Cedillo.
Mr. President, you know this as well as anybody. The Korean American community is part of the great fabric of the city of Los Angeles. They are part of what creates what this great city is. They bring their culture with us. They bring their values with us. And it's interesting, I talk frequently as an advocate for immigrants, and particularly immigrants from Latin America. They are the consummate immigrant. Entrepreneurial spirit, belief in democracy, family values, religious values. They are the consummate future American. And so I'm very proud to be here. As you know, you and I in the legislature worked together on several pieces of legislation. We created the law that provided the opportunity for soju to be sold in the supermarkets and in the cafes and bars, and it's a very, very popular. But we also worked on creating the first Korean American museum. And that was something that I think you and I are very proud of. And then finally, we worked to make sure that there was no abuse of the Korean American manufacturers when we created the bill related to key money. And so those pieces of legislation were part of our efforts to integrate into the mainstream Korean Americans so that they could play their role right alongside all the other groups that are part of the great fabric of this great city. As we know, Korean immigration has been coming to the United States for over 100 years. And so they are fully, fully integrated into our community as any other group. I'm proud to have Debbie Kim, part of my staff, But I've also had great Korean Americans like Kimberly Yu, that you remember, and Kathy Rayu. You may also remember her up in the Capitol. And so they've played an important part in help educating me. And of course, there was that great trip, Tom Labange, that I went to Seoul and Busan and had a great opportunity to see the vibrancy of their economy and the vibrancy of their spirit and understand why they play such a valuable role in our city. So welcome and a great celebration to Korean American Appreciation Week.
Thank you so much.
And Mr. Labange, if I may interrupt briefly to say welcome to so many of my friends that are here today. My President Ahn and others from the Federation and all of you. But I have to just take an extra moment to talk about the core of the Koreatown area. Literally, that area was going down. If it were not for the creativity and the resources of the Korean community, that area would not have held strong. Not only is it strong now, it is vibrant and going. And that is because they believed in that area when other people did not. And I think we in the city of Los Angeles should be grateful for that, because the Koreatown area is taking off, and just an unbelievable place to be. What Mr. Cedillo referenced about we are busy working to create the first Korean American museum outside of Korea. You know, we've recently completed the construction of a senior citizen center. Working together, we've had accomplishment after accomplishment, and I just want to say to each and every one of you, Taedanhi 감사합니다. Mr. O'Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Mr. Labange, thank you so much for leading the way today on celebrating Korean American Day. I have a slice of Koreatown in the 13th District, a significant and wonderful, vibrant piece of CD 13, Council District 13, which I'm so honored to represent. I want to also welcome all of you today. And back in 1985, for about a year, I lived on Edgemont, which is within the Wilshire Center Koreatown Neighborhood Council area, which also is a significant and active participant in my district. And I got a sense now, 30 years in the running now, of just the contributions culturally, economically, that Korean Americans have made, not just to the 13th District, but to the city of Los Angeles. And that's not lost on me. I also want to introduce my Chief of Staff, Jeannie Min. Jeannie is right here. Jeannie,
hey, Jeannie.
Wave. Who is a really integral part in my greater ability to serve my district, and that includes Koreatown. So thank you, welcome, and congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Farrell. And could I please have a little quiet? Shh. Mr. Parks.
Thank you very much. I just want to welcome all of you to the City Council, but particularly a young lady that we've been working with for a number of years, and that's a person that identified a cultural center. I think it was the first Korean American church on West Jefferson, and now the plans are turning it into a historical center at 1359 West 24th Street, and create a cultural monument. And just want to say thank you to Christine Lee, who has been the mainstay and staying in touch with our office along with planning to make that happen. So thank you very much.
Mr. Labange,
I like
back to you.
All those nice words. And Jeannie Min was my chief of staff before she went to the 13th District, so I wanted to throw that in, with me for many years. But what's so important, the community's here. And all of the community that is here is so special. And I wanted to introduce the president of the Korean American Federation, James Ahn, who's going to speak some remarks. Please, James.
Okay, Mr. President, before you start, Mr. Buscaino.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's great to welcome each and every one of you here celebrating our Korean community in the city of Los Angeles. I joined Mayor Garcetti in his recent trade mission along with Mr. Bonin and visited Seoul, Korea. And there we honored, the government honored Mayor Garcetti as an honorary citizen of Seoul. And the people in South Korea welcomed us with open arms, their hospitality. We'll never forget that experience. And we're able to meet with our trade partners in Korea. And in my district alone, the Port of Los Angeles is a great partner with South Korea, and in a great symbol of the friendships between our mutual countries is the great Korean friendship bell in San Pedro. And knowing that San Pedro is home to the highest ranking Korean here in the city of Los Angeles, Deputy Mayor Don Liu. We're proud of his accomplishments, and to see also a new generation of leadership arising in the Korean community here with Commissioner Bobby An, who's here in the planning commissioner. Thanks, Bobby, for your leadership and dedication. So knowing that, Mr. President, this is you oversee Koreatown, and your leadership and guidance to really help with the economic development efforts in Koreatown is something that we honor and thank you as well for your leadership. So, 감사합니다. Thank you very much, and God bless Koreatown. Thank you.
Thank you. And now my dear friend, the President, James Hire. Give him a round of applause. Mr. President.
Good morning, Mr. President Hub Wesson, honorable council members. And thank you for joining us in the celebration of Korean American Day. This year, I'm proud to join all Korean Americans throughout the United States, and in particular, those here in the city of Los Angeles. As we celebrate this important occasion, it is with great pleasure that I extend my best wishes to the entire Korean American community. As we take a moment to reflect on our proud heritage, since the first Korean immigrants arrived to this country over 100 years ago, our community has grown to incredible new heights, and we continue to make positive and lasting contributions to this great city and to this great country. I'm especially proud of the close relationship between the United States and the Republic of Korea. Our two countries share a deep and historic friendship, most recently evidenced by the passage of the Korea-U.S. Free Trade Agreement. I'm certain that these ties will only grow stronger over time. I also want to thank Mayor Eric Garcetti, Council President Hub Wesson, and each of our other honorable city council members for your friendship and support. Over the years, we have built a very strong partnership with one another, and we look forward to continue this growing relationship to achieve even greater accomplishments together in the future. With the celebration of Korean American Day, we continue to be reminded of the legacy of this partnership and the future achievements yet to come. Thank you again, and happy Korean American Day.
Mr. President, I thank you. I do want to say the best good news story last year is when Sammy Lee was found safe, and you made it Dr. Sammy Lee Square at Olympic in Normandy, the great Olympian who grew up in Los Angeles, went to Franklin High, and won the gold medal in 48 Olympic Games. And then we think of Korea, too, with Busan as our sister city and Seoul as sister Olympic cities. Let's hear it for Korean American Day in Los Angeles. Yay. Everybody put their hands up. Hands up. Hands up. Hands up. Good. Super. Right here. Thank you. We're going to go to the back. Thank you.
Thank you for that very important presentation. And again, to all of you, Tedan Hikam Samida, thank you for all that you've done. Smile, say cheese.
Debbie.
Okay, Mr. Clerk, we're going to vote on reconsideration on item 6. We have a card on that item. So if we could vote, members, to reconsider item 6, let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
Okay, on item 6, Mr. Herman. Okay, he passes. So now let's vote on this item. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
We'll move to item 2. Mr. Murphy, are you here? It was called special by Sean Murphy. Shh.
Yeah.
Yes, sir, Sean. Happy
Yes,
New
good
Year.
morning, Mr. President. Item 2 is a good item. I support it.
Thank you so much. Now let's prepare to vote on item 2. Let us open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
All right, let's move on to item 7. Sean, this item 7 is yours as well.
Yes, item 7 is a good item. I want to say congratulations for Korean Day. I want to say kamsahamnida, but they left too soon.
Stay on the subject, but thank you. All right, let's prepare to vote on this item. Let us open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
Okay, next item, please. I believe it's item 11,
Yes, sir.
and it's called special.
It's called Special for Cards and by Councilmember Buscaino.
Great, excellent. Thank you so much. John Walsh, come on up.
John Walsh, blogging at HollywoodHighlands.org or J. Walsh Confidential, or tweeting at Hollywood Dems, emailing at hollywooddems@gmail.com. This is concerning Ms. Alma Ortiz to the Harbor Area Planning Commission. We hope that your first order of business here will be to ban wooden structures that are coated with petroleum-based coverings. That was the cause of the gigantic fire down there a few months ago. Petroleum-based coverings are outlawed in most places in the United States, but because they're cheaper, the Planning Commission allows people who own businesses down there to coat their wooden structures. Now, a wooden structure with flame
Please stay on the
retardants-
subject matter.
I'm
This is on the
talking
commission
about Harbor Planning Commission decisions. That's what I'm talking about. This was one of them.
Great. Thank you, John. Thank you, John. Thanks. Okay. Seeing no other speakers, but we do have a member called it special.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Mr. Buscaino.
Thank you. If I may call Ms. Ortiz to the table on this item, I want to thank Mayor Garcetti for putting forward a credible and exciting candidate here. Alma Ortiz was recognized as Council District 15's Latino Heritage Month recipient awardee in 2013, and has always wanting to lead an effort in changing economic development opportunities and in bringing economic development opportunities to the Wilmington community. She comes out of Michoacan, Mexico, and landed in Mexico, and is just a rising star in the Latino community, specifically in Wilmington. We are so excited about this appointment, and she is joined by her loving husband, Ignacio, who helps move our economy as a longshoreman down in the harbor area. Her sisters, Teresa and Lupe, and Lupe is just another champion for us in Wilmington, working alongside the United Way through and has initiated a number of reading projects in the Wilmington community. And their nephew, Cesar, is here. So, and of course, her loving mother, supportive mother, Martha, who has also joined us. So, Alma, tell us a little about yourself and why you want to take on this role.
Well, first of all, I want to just say good morning to the council. And first of all, I do want to just say thank you for this opportunity. I thank you for the appointment. With honor and pleasure, I accept this appointment that under your recommendation and under the appointment of our Mayor Garcetti. I am very excited to do this position as an immigrant, as a woman entrepreneur, and as a person that understands the need for continued growth and development in our, not just my own immediate community, but the surrounding cities as well. I am very excited to be a part of this so that I can learn as much as I can to be of best service for this position, and just to be of best interest for the city of Los Angeles. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Alma. And just as humble as she is, Alma and her husband, Ignacio, started a small business, Hojas Tea House, on Avalon Boulevard in Wilmington, and it's just thriving to the point where, yes, where they opened up a second store in downtown San Pedro, and we encourage you to come visit Hojas Tea House. And they also give back to the community, and they serve just with a heart of gold, and their faith really emanates across the city in Wilmington. So, colleagues, I ask for an aye vote. Alma is going to bring just a new energy, and it's great to see another Latino rise in the ranks here in our beloved Wilmington community, and the fact that she's supported by her loving family is really exciting. So I ask for an aye vote in this confirmation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. And seeing no other speakers on the queue, we'll go ahead, please, and open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
Congratulations. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, let's go ahead and take item 14, if we can, next, please. And we'll take 14, called special for cards. Sean?
Yeah, item 14 is another one I support. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much. Herman? If you're going to come up, you pass? Okay, great. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. All right, item 14, we'll go ahead and open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
Great, thank you very much. Let's go ahead, if we can, and jump to item 1. We do have a special request on item 1F to continue it for 2 weeks, which would take us to January 28th, I believe, and 1M for 30 days, which would take us to February 13th.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Without objection, sir?
Okay, yes. Without objection, that'll be the order. And on the remaining items, are there other remaining items on 1?
Yes, sir, there are.
Okay, and seeing no other cards for that item, we'll go ahead and open the roll. Actually, we do have some cards on 1. So let's not open the roll yet. We'll officially rescind the opening of the roll. Eric Schneider on 1D. Robert Williams on 1G. Pass. Wayne?
I appreciate that. Yes, I reviewed the list of these liens. There were other people here that came. One man paid the lien, and then he was not given a receipt by the city, and then the lien has continued to accrue interest. So there should be a new rule. Each person that appears for these liens should absolutely come up to the podium to be sure that they have the lien satisfied if it's been paid, and if it hasn't been paid, to waive it. And I've said this before, because each councilman gets $2 million a year of discretionary money. Each councilman can afford to give a small gift back to the taxpayers in these liens, because if the person's coming here, then the person is actively participating in resolving or mitigating the issue in most cases. Every time you see these people here, they're cleaning up whatever it is. Usually it's old cars, or they're running a garage in their backyards, because you can't afford to open a business in Los Angeles, so they have to do it in their backyards. You know, Mr. Koretz can speak as an expert to that in CD5. But also, everybody that comes here to speak and attend should also be given a voucher for parking, a per diem for lunch, and if they could establish what a reasonable amount of a day's pay is, a half day's pay, like jury service, because they're being summoned to the council to appear on a very substantial monetary fine. So I think if you do this, it will encourage people to come and clean up and mitigate, and I think the city in the long run will save a lot of money and improve blight in the city. Thank you.
Jesse? Germano? Come on up. Now, 1M, I wanted to let you know before you come to the podium, we did continue your item for 30 days. So we're not going to be voting on it for 30 days. Okay? Okay, you go ahead and pass. Okay. Herman?
Angelinos, the poor gentleman doesn't understand his due process rights here, and it would be in the best and greatest interest of all of you politicians to step it up and address the issue with the gentleman, to give him a receipt so that the assessment of this violation does not linger and hang on to his parcel of property, so that later on you can address the same bullshit issue here with the lien. Excuse the French, Mr. Englander, I'm speaking while you're talking up there.
You're not speaking
So
to
I'm saying
me
to
specifically.
you,
You're speaking to the entire
offer the
council. You will
people a
address the
receipt
entire
for the
council
due
and not
process
single anybody
needed here
out. That's
today,
going to be
and
your
I'm
only
holding
warning.
my time to 1 minute. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Walsh, come on up.
John Walsh at HollywoodHighlands.org. The gentleman asked me on item L. He's got his car parked and he's got to leave very, very quickly. So, but he's available right now for a few seconds from his city councilman to talk about L, which is 1122 West 65th Street. The lien is for $1,434.52. It was continued from council meeting of December 12, 2014, and he's asking for another 30-day extension. And he's back here, and I hope this organization isn't so racist, and whoever his city councilman or woman is will answer his, speak to him right now. That's item L 1122 West 65th Street. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. We have one more card on item 1, but we're going to get some direction. We believe it can be continued, or it may not. We're just checking in with council office. Okay, on 1J, we're actually going to go ahead and hold it for 30 days without objection until February 13th. That'll be the order without objection. We do have one card, Salvador, on 1J. We went ahead and continue your item for 30 days, so don't know if you still wanted to speak to that or not, but we're going to go ahead and continue it for 30 days so you can work with the department.
I've been trying to get in contact and get this resolved. It doesn't seem to be working. I don't understand how 200% interest is on something that, you know, I passed it out to the tenant who lived there at the time, and he was supposed to pay it, didn't pay it. I thought it was paid. Now, a year later, I get this letter, and it's $3,000, $4,000.
So Building and Safety and the council office said that they're going to go ahead and work with you over the next 30 days to figure out if they can come into some other amicable conclusion.
But how is that even possible that interest is over a year?
I can't have a dialogue with you on it. Unfortunately, it's just public comment. So if you want to go ahead and go to the side of the ropes, they'll go ahead and set those meetings up with you. Great, you got it. Thank you so much, sir. Okay, seeing no other speaker cards on the remaining items on items 1, we'll go ahead and open the roll on those remaining items. Close the roll and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
Great, thank you so much. Let's go ahead and take items 9 and 10, commission appointments. Those are for cards only. Sean and John. Okay, and we do have a couple other cards on that as well. John, you've got cards on 9 and 10.
Yeah, commissioner appointments. Yeah, they should be commissioners. Thank you.
John Walsh, blogging at HollywoodHighlands.org. Mr. Dake is over here. You appointed him previously to the MWD Southern California term ending. The mayor did. And now he's being reapproved. I'd like to point out that this is a paid position. And also, Mr. Dake has a relationship, a long-time gay lover relationship with the mayor, which I think makes him a spouse. And as the mayor's spouse, you can have a male spouse and a female spouse. Mr. Dake used to be Garcetti's deputy in Hollywood, and now he's got a job he's totally unqualified for. The only thing he qualifies for is that he's a gardener, and he uses water in his job. But other than that, and again, if anything I say is not true, you jump on me if I make the slightest mistake. I said Turfer was federal.
You know full well, John, that actually we can't say whether what you say is true or not.
You contradict me constantly.
Only when you're off subject. Now you're off subject. Thank you. Sean? Sean, you already spoke. I'm sorry. Herman? Sean, you already spoke on this.
No offense to anyone, but as brought out regarding the reappointment of Mr. Glenn Dake, I find it inappropriate that the council president engages with the public constituent not to finish
Stay on subject.
His First Amendment right to be heard on the subject matter like I am trying to attempt to do, Mr. Speaker, with all consideration and due respect So I'm intimidated by you, and I'm going to step
If you're not
away
on the subject
and hold
matter,
my
you're going to
1
be
minute.
asked to
Thank
walk
you.
away from the podium. Thank you so much. Wayne? Must be a full moon. Okay.
And for the record, he walked away on his own.
Yes, he did. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, there's much verbal violence here that we don't need that. This is a celebration. People are being appointed and reappointed unanimously to commissions. We could play 5 questions with each of the council members here. Which one is Dake going to be on? Oh, sorry, you don't know, because it doesn't matter. This has all been pre-authorized. This is a dog and pony show. That's all it is. Yes, vote yes. You know, there's a buzzer, and you got to press it to vote no, but you don't have to vote because it automatically votes yes for you, as long as you're inside the chambers. You can be over there at the wall, and you're still present. You don't have to sit at the.
You got to stay on the subject matter.
Oh yeah, Anyway, somebody brought up this rumor. One of these people may have an involvement with the mayor. I don't know what that is. Did anybody in these reports look into that? Let's see. We have the experts here at the podium. Let's ask the experts here what they recommend. Was there anything involving this person and the mayor? No. Okay. So that answers the question. It'll be unanimously passed. These people will be paid to do nothing, especially on the Metropolitan Water District. It's raining like hell. Go up to the mountains and see all that water. Are our rates going to go down now? No, they're going to go up. You know why? Because they're going to find another reason to keep raising our rates, especially the commercial tenants in Koreatown and elsewhere are getting killed on commercial water rates. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. LaBonge.
Mr. Murray, you come up. Mr. Dake, thank you very much for your service to the City of Los Angeles. The Metropolitan Water District is a very important organization, and we're partners. We helped create it with William Mulholland. And just give us a brief on what we have to continue to be water conscious and the efforts that we have to make to conserve water so it's good for the whole state.
Thank you, Councilman LaBonge. Los Angeles leads the way on conservation in this state, and actually, I think we lead the way in the nation. The mayor has set a goal to become more water independent and less reliant on imported water by 2024, and I think Los Angeles is well on the way to do that. In the Metropolitan Water District, we have increased the budget for conservation that we paid to homeowners and businesses to take out turf and put in drought-resistant plants, and we're going to continue to work to make sure that Los Angeles has the water it needs, even though we're in a deep drought. And we don't know when we're going to come out of this. And so thank you for the opportunity to continue to serve.
Thank you. I'd just add that the winter period now is a time where it's cool and it's been a little bit wetter. So now's the time to save water on your turf irrigation. You can turn those sprinklers off during the wet months because we're going to need that water in the summer. The drought is still with us.
Thank you. And members, these are fine, upstanding representatives for us in the MWD. We need it to snow more up in the Owens Valley, in the Alabama Hills, and all the way through to Mount Whitney and on the Eastern Sierras, because that's where the source comes from, as well as Metropolitan's cooperation and collaboration with other water agencies here in the Southland. I personally thank you both for the important job that you do in representing the City of Los Angeles. Thank you. I ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. LaBonge. Mr. Koretz.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've had the great good fortune of getting to serve with John Murray and Glenn Dake, and we've been a good team. We've worked hard on getting more funding for local water supply projects and aquifer cleanup and much more money for conservation. I think we've helped to turn Met in absolutely the right direction. And particularly without John Murray, who has many years of experience and knows the ins and outs, the MWD is kind of an incomprehensible maze otherwise. And it used to be said that when you got appointed to the board, you wouldn't speak for the first 5 years till you really understood how it worked. And with John's guidance, we've been able to jump right in and accomplish a lot. And Glenn, with his experience on water projects, stormwater projects, water capture, and generally a very on-target background, we've been a very good team, and I will be eternally grateful if you reappoint these two gentlemen to the Met Board.
Great. Thank you very much. And seeing no other speakers on the queue, we'll go ahead and open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
It's unanimous. Congratulations. Thank you both
very much.
Thank you. All right, let's go ahead and go to item 15, called special for cards as well. Herman? Unless you're going to speak and you're just going to waste the council's time, I'm going to ask you to step away from the podium. It's not public comment if you're just going to stand there.
Thank you for listening, sir. Now that we have your attention and we can speak about Mr. Huizar and Busquiano's relative additional funding to finance a beautification project in Council District 14, how long have all the constituents in El Sereno, Highland Park, Boyle Heights have been neglected by beautification projects that never produced a damn thing? The chinchero, the rubbish, is horrible in Boyle Heights. And I can't blame anyone other than Jose Huizar because he represents Boyle Heights. And I can't say anything negative about the city of downtown, the corridors, because they look excellent. Beautiful, right? But yet, Grand Park grass is yellow, brown, and no longer green. So if we're going to ask for a 45,000 pipeline revenue proposition, real estate property taxing, I say no. I object on behalf of all the constituents who have been impacted by no beautification projects throughout the years of Councilman Huizar running in Council District 14. So now that he wants to be reelected, isn't this beautiful? Vote for Nadine Diaz better, who's at Council District 14. I'm still on the subject matter of Council District 14. And besides, Mr. Busquiano, you're out in Long Beach. You have no purpose.
Please don't
in
address
CG
directly
14.
any of the council members.
Thank you,
You're
and good
addressing the entire
afternoon.
chamber. Thank you. Wayne.
Might get you off topic.
Yes. The last thing we want to be is off topic. So let's see here. In plain English, today we're going to steal $45,000 in the pipeline franchise revenue portion of Council District 14 Real Property Trust Fund to the Department of Public Works, that's Kevin James, Bureau of Street Services, and he's going to beautify CD 14 with only $45,000. All of the trash, rubbish will be eliminated. Now that is a good reason why to re-elect Jose Huizar to CD 14, because Gloria Molina, she's not going to take that $45,000 and beautify the district. She'll order pizzas and give it to all of her staff to eat. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No other speakers on the queue. Seeing no other cards, we'll go ahead and open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
Okay, that takes us to our final item, item 13. And we'll go to cards first. Bill Huey.
Good morning, Council President and members of the LA City Council. My name is Bill Huey. This item 13 is about retrofitting apartment buildings. Most of the landlords who own the older buildings that need their retrofitting are under rent control, and a lot of them are collecting 40%, 35% of fair market value rent. They're barely surviving, and if you make them pay for this retrofitting, it'll pull them out of business. Now, we're not saying we want unhealthy buildings, but the government has to help out here, or let us pass it through to the tenants, because in the last 15 years ago, we had 1.2 million registered apartments, and now we're losing apartments every year because LA has created a climate that small landlords can't survive. I was at a housing committee meeting last month, and they voted to declare that the homelessness problem in LA is now at an emergency level. If you beat up on the mom and pop landlords, you'll drive them out of business, more people become homeless, and nothing gets solved. So you either have to find some kind of free grant money for these landlords, or let them pass it through the tenant over a certain amount of years. That way the tenants don't get impacted severely either. Thank you very much. FairHousingCoalition.com.
Bill Hobie, H-O-B-R-Y. The next speaker, Bill Huey. That was me. I got it, Bill. Dan Fowler.
Thank you for this opportunity, Mr. Chairman, City Council. My name is Dan Fowler. I represent the Apartment Owners Association of California. We're one of the largest individually organized group of apartment owners in the city of Los Angeles. We have not been consulted on this item, as the newspapers kind of indicated. Not one idea has come from AOA, and we're one of the largest group of housing providers in the country. Bottom line, we do not support this mandate, that it be mandated. We do support that it be done, and we do encourage our housing providers to provide earthquake-proof buildings if they can afford to do it. Number one, please provide the money. Put it on the table before you pass this kind of an ordinance. That's talking about a lot of money. Give us at least 10 to 25 years to get this thing done. Let us pass the cost on to the renters, who are the people who will benefit from this. They're the ones that will benefit, not the housing providers. For providers who can afford this, give us a pass-through and streamline the permit process. Streamline it so that it can be done easily and quickly. Also, consider that the current capital improvement pass-through is almost impossible for an ordinary apartment owner to get through and do it, and so they don't do it. That process needs to be changed. Please know that we do encourage our members to make their buildings earthquake-proof. Do not pass this proposal until the money is there. Please consider the cost of the people you're asking to pay for it. If I take $50,000 to $100,000 out of my 401k and do this to my building, what is it costing me? Figure it out. In 20 years, it's costing me a loss of my retirement of somewhere between $400,000 and $800,000. That's the real cost of what you're going to vote on and what people are recommending that you do.
Charles,
thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Charles Betts. Charles here.
Good morning. I own apartment buildings, and I think I'm a good landlord. And if you're a good landlord, then your tenants don't move. And the housing department says that the tenants turn over every 5 years. I had a building for 37 years, and I had a tenant that lived there for 37 years. My tenants' rents are $500 a month below market because my tenants do not move. And now I have no objection to retrofitting the building, but my understanding from what Dr. Lucy Jones said is it's not going to save the building, it's going to save lives. And I should invest my money in a building that I know that I'm going to lose. Doesn't make any sense to me, and I'm going to pay for that where is the money going to come from? And I also heard that you're talking about tax credits. We don't pay that much tax to the city or the state. And it's going to take 10 years at least to recoup our money. And I won't be here 10 years from now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Estelle Tellenbaum.
Good morning. I'm a rental housing provider for almost 50 years. And thanks to the rent control ordinance, I'm almost broke. My line of credit is full. My mortgages are more than when I first bought the buildings. You people have to think and follow through on anything you do, because the ramifications are really terrible. You created code enforcement. They're more like the Gestapo. You have the smoke detectors, the tenants take them off. You have low-flow toilets. It costs twice as much because they flush them 10 times as much. If you're willing to pay for this retrofitting, I'm all for it. I don't have the money, and I'm willing to go to jail, because you have to be statesmen and not politicians, and do what's best for this city once and for all. And stop listening to the tenant advocates, because one day you'll wake up and there'll be 100 units, new apartments. All the mom and pops will be gone, and the rents will start at $2,000 and $3,000 for us one bedroom. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tannenbaum. Earl Vaughn.
Good morning, Council. Good morning, Tom. I wanted to speak on behalf of our members, Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles, AGLA. I'm a past president of AGLA. I'm the current chair of our Earthquake Committee. Many of you have talked to me before. Dr. Lucy Jones did include us in the process, and we appreciate that. We spoke with her at length about a variety of practical problems that would go into this. We know that it is a citywide problem, and we know it is a problem of building safety, which is of great concern to all of us. But I want to echo the comments of the people that have come up. There are 3 issues with this, in our mind, primary issues: funding, funding, funding. What I would suggest is that the council look at a few different things. Adrien Nazarian had a bill that was shelved in the State Assembly that would have given a 25% California state credit to people that did earthquake retrofitting. I would urge the council to issue a motion in support of such a bill. I'm understanding that he and Isidore Hall will be reintroducing that this year. I wanted to know if the Housing Committee and the Council could direct the Housing Department to come up with sources of funding within the Housing Department. Are there any potential sources of funding within the Housing Department's purview? And lastly, I wanted to know if the Council had considered talking with our county supervisors to see if there are any potential property tax breaks that could be issued for all of these buildings, which by definition are rent control buildings, and therefore under the rent control ordinance, and lack funding for the owners to do it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Vaughn. If you go to the ropes over there, I want you to go see him, Abak, on that issue. Get that information. Thank you. The next speaker will be Kevin Moret. Kevin Moret. Keith Moret.
Good morning, council members. Thanks for this opportunity. I am a small apartment owner, and I also sell apartment buildings, so most of my clients are in the same position as me. We count on the equity and the cash flow that we've worked really hard to generate for our retirement, and an ordinance like this could severely impact that. So I'd ask you to please make sure that the small apartment owners like myself and most of the people I deal with have the opportunity to enjoy their hard work and help them in their retirement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Keith. Vic Vicarick from North Hollywood, California.
Good morning. I'm an apartment owner and CPA, and having been an apartment owner for 40 years and knowing the industry, it's very crucial in this case for the retrofitting that lives are saved. Those are the tenants who live in the properties. Lives are saved, and also once the people are safe, they also have to have the housing on a continuous basis. And that gets us down to having to be able to afford to get the work done. And the way the rent stabilization ordinance is, it's very difficult to get loans to help finance that. If the owners are allowed over a long enough period of time, or short enough period even, to be able to collect rents, to be able to cover the costs, that will help. But these costs for retrofitting are tremendous compared to ordinary capital improvements. It's really a lot. And I've heard that there are so many thousands of units that need to be done. And the city also needs to have the resources. Well, not the city, but people living in the city who do the work. There need to be enough of those people to be able to be out there and do that work within the so-called 5 years. It needs to be more than 5 years. And owners need to be incentivized to be able to start early and get the work done. That in itself can save lives. We don't know if that big earthquake is going to be today or 10 years from today. We need to get the job done, and it's not just a matter of politics. It's a matter of getting the industry to be able to provide the service that it's there for. And it's very difficult the way the regulations are right now. Thank you.
John Walsh.
John Walsh, blogging at HollywoodHighlands.org, J. Walsh Confidential. I've gone through, I think, 3 earthquakes while I was in front of a classroom at LAUSD, and I know about earthquakes. I moved here in 1966 for the first time. Where's Lucy Jones? Let me tell you, they have an issue, the apartment. The broad issue is, and I don't see Lucy Jones here to answer.
Address the issue. She's here, John.
But she should be up here so we can see her. And she's hiding someplace. This city is woefully unprepared for an earthquake. This building could fall apart. Read the fine print. Miss Lucy Jones is paid to say everything is fine. This city, if there is a major earthquake of 6 or higher, this city is going to be in chaos. The mayor doesn't know what he's doing. Nobody really has a plan. And the number one thing is many, many people will be killed on the red line during an earthquake. It already crosses one earthquake fault. The earthquake faults in Hollywood, in this city, guarantee gigantic loss of life if we get a major earthquake. And what are you doing? Rubber stamping Miss Lucy Jones. You act like she's the Blessed Virgin Mary. I'm telling you, all she's doing is what the mayor pays her to say. Everything's fine. And I want to say to anybody who's watching this, you better have a lot of food in your house, because when the earthquake comes, you're going to be isolated, and these politicians will be running for cover to save their own backsides. HollywoodHighlands.org.
Jose Fernandez.
Morning, Council. My name is Jose Fernandez. I'm a community organizer with the East LA Community Corporation, tenant at Wagonwood Garden Apartments in Boyle Heights, and here working with the Renters de LA Coalition. Just here to express some deep concern about the passing of 100% of the retrofit cost to the tenants. We live in a city where the rents are constantly going up and incomes are stagnating Folks are losing their jobs, and so folks are being put in the bind to decide whether they're going to continue to pay rent or they're going to move elsewhere, and that's something that we cannot afford. While the repairs are necessary, it is not fair to pass over the entire cost to the tenants who are suffering and who are highly vulnerable to the effects of displacement in their respective communities. We feel that it is a landlord's obligation to really provide safe and quality housing to the tenants here in the city. They're in it, it's a business for them, and so they should be responsible for the well-being of the tenants. So again, I highly recommend that there is a reconsideration to not pass over 100% of the cost of these earthquake retrofits to the tenants, and that there is a viable alternative identified so that the well-being of the tenants here in the city remains a top priority. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have cards right here. You can hold your applause. Elsa, please come forward right now. How do you? Thelma Perez. Okay, we're going to hold that. These are people who are general comments. And for the proposal, Martha Cox Mitchman. Yeah, thank you. And I'm going to hold these cards. I want to hear from Lucy Jones as you do, and we'll get back to the cards after Ms. Jones makes a presentation.
Good morning. My name is Martha Cox Niddickman. I'm with the Building Owners and Managers Association. We represent over 300 commercial office building owners. I'm actually here today in support of the overall structure of the proposal. I want to specifically focus, however, on the concrete building proposal, not on the apartment proposal. We work very closely with the mayor's office, and there's a lot of elements that we think are the appropriate way to go, such as the 30-year time frame. Again, the major concern is, as the previous speakers have said, is cost. Many of the owners are not necessarily corporations, but families that own these concrete buildings. We're concerned that the very high cost of retrofitting commercial concrete buildings, it includes having the building be empty for a number of years. This is a big concern. You've just lost your rent, and now you have to go and expend hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we know that the council is already considering looking at some kind of state legislation. We think seismic vulnerability is a state problem, and they need to step up on this. We would also hope that the council might look at something like a revolving loan fund. So we look forward to working with you as we all move forward on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Clerk, I'm going to hold these cards at the moment, so suspend that time. Let's hear Dr. Jones to the center table, along with Mr. Bury and the Deputy Mayor, if you would, please. Mr. Koretz, do you have a statement? At this time, we want to hear from Dr. Jones.
I just have a question for her, but I'm happy to hear from her first.
Very kind of you. Thank you, Mr. Koretz. Appreciate it. Dr. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Labange. And I'm going to get the microphone close. I can't project very well today. Thank you for having me here to talk about this. Of course, I was here just a few months ago to give you the problem. We've talked about that several times, so I don't intend to go back and look at that again. Rather, I want to look at what the solutions that we are proposing and what's been able to be come up with. So first, I do want to thank you for having me back. I think that what we've accomplished in the last year working together, I've spent the last year with this mayor's office and with talking to a lot of people around the city, and I think we've been able to get a really good look at what are the issues that imperil the future of the city itself. And we've talked about that before, so I won't spend more time on that now. The focus of the overall project, so the report includes 18 recommendations. It's obviously the buildings are a very important part of it. They are only one part of it, though, because what we are focused on is how to make sure that the city is still here and still exists after the earthquake. So we're trying to create resilience for our city, which means a society that's still functioning after that disaster. To accomplish that, we need to do three big things. We need to survive the earthquake. We need to not kill our citizens during the event. We need to be able to respond. There are a lot of things that can't be prevented, but that can be responded to, such as trying to prevent the fires from getting out of control. And then we need to be able to recover. And that's really the fundamental issue, that when we look at other big cities that have gone through really big earthquakes and hurricanes, the issue is that it might take them many decades to get back, or they never get back to where they were. And that's really been the fundamental goal that we've tried to address through this project, is not to prevent all the damage, but how to make sure that Los Angeles is still here, so that our apartment owners can still rent out their buildings, so that our businesses can still operate. Enough of the infrastructure still there, and enough of the people not killed or driven out, so that we can keep on functioning as a society. So, with that goal, there are three sets of recommendations within the report addressing the issues around buildings, especially our older buildings that are potentially deadly, around our water system, because we can't function without water and we can't fight fires without water, and around telecommunications, because the reality is, as a modern urban society has to have telecommunications for our economy to keep on functioning. Within that, I'm going to spend most of the time talking about the recommendations of the buildings, because those are the ones that really come before council that are going to require ordinances to move forward, and that you're going to be the ones who need to be figuring out how to make this work against all of the other needs of the city. So there are 5 recommendations within the building section, 2 of them about mandatory retrofit, well, actually 3 of them about retrofitting buildings, a rating system, and also how to facilitate getting back up after the earthquake as quickly as possible. Let's look first at the mandatory retrofit of soft first-story buildings. The proposal is to address all of the buildings that have this issue. The overwhelming majority in Los Angeles are apartment buildings. They are not the only ones. There are condominiums, there are commercial structures that have this weakness. This is the Northridge Meadows apartment that killed 16 people in the Northridge earthquake. And as bad as that is, I think it's more significant to look at the city lost 49,000 housing units, primarily because of the failure of these buildings in the Northridge earthquake. So yes, people died, and we really want to prevent this. We also want to keep the buildings there and still functioning. And while the retrofit being proposed is not going to guarantee the building functioning through all earthquakes, it's going to greatly increase the likelihood that the building is going to be up and functioning and rentable and inhabitable after the earthquake. So this is not just about preventing deaths. It is about keeping an affordable housing stock for the city of Los Angeles, because as you've heard, the majority of these buildings are the affordable housing, and we lose these, we really make this a place that a lot of people can't live in afterwards. It is being proposed to be mandatory because voluntary doesn't work. We have had a voluntary retrofit ordinance for this for 20 years. That was what happened after the Northridge earthquake. Voluntary repeatedly hasn't worked whenever it's been applied. I mean, a few buildings do it, but most of them don't. Okay. And I think the other important thing to be focused on here is that the way we've been addressing this issue over the years is that the cost of retrofitting is been put solely on the owners and the tenants potentially. The costs of not retrofitting hit all of us. When one building goes down, its neighbor loses property value. When a building goes down, its tenants lose a place to live, and their employers potentially lose their workforce because they no longer have a place to be and they end up abandoning the community. One of the things that we discovered as we went through this research is that the only years in which Los Angeles has lost population were 71, 72 right after the 71 earthquake, and 94, 95 right after the Northridge earthquake. Every other year in the history of Los Angeles, we have gained population. And those, I got to keep on getting back to it, those were not really big earthquakes. They were significant. They really affected us. Our future holds much larger earthquakes than that. On the strengthening of concrete buildings, again, this is about 1,400 commercial and residential properties. All of them are pre-1980. Of those, we don't know how many actually need the retrofit. With this, unlike the brick buildings back in the 1980s or the soft first story where you can stand on the outside and say, this is that type of building, the concrete buildings that need retrofitting require a structural engineering analysis. So the proposal gives more time to these types of buildings because we need to go through that evaluation process. Also, there's a lot of work in the engineering community developing new approaches to both understanding which are the bad buildings and developing a retrofit program that we think is going to mean some buildings don't have to be retrofitted, and we hope is going to be developing some cheaper approaches to the retrofitting. That work is underway, being funded by FEMA right now. We expect the results in 2016 or 2017. And so one reason that the proposal gives 5 years for the evaluation is to make sure we can take advantage of this new research that should develop a more cost-effective approach. But again, we've had voluntary programs for developing these retrofits. They haven't led to the retrofitting up till now. And these are the deadliest buildings. These are the ones that when they do collapse, we're talking about concrete coming down on people. And when we did our analysis of the shakeout earthquake, the majority of the fatalities happened within these types of buildings. The next proposal is for a voluntary rating system. And what this means is getting people to start talking about how good their building is. Because the question isn't it's good or it's not good. There's buildings that will probably kill people when they have strong shaking nearby. There are ones that mostly you're going to get out alive, but the building's a complete loss. There are modern, and the current building code is saying make sure people don't die, but if it's a financial loss, that's your choice to make. So even the buildings going up right now, their standard is make sure you can crawl out alive. And that's a really big issue for the city of Los Angeles. Imagine if all of these new construction going on right now, the earthquake happens, nobody dies, but say half of our buildings can't be used. That's the building standard we are building to right now. But one of the reasons that's true is because people don't understand it. We don't know that that's what we're doing. And so the point behind the voluntary rating system is to get people starting to talk about it, to recognize that we can do better. There are institutions like Caltech and USC that are building to own their own buildings. Neither of them builds just to code anymore. They build above code because they don't want to invest in a building that's going to be gone at the end. Right? And so we need to get that information out there. Now, we discussed and did not decide to move forward with a mandatory rating system. One thing is getting a full rating requires that structural engineer and a lot of money. And I don't see us spending billions of dollars to just rate our buildings. But we can start moving forward. And part of the proposal is for the city itself to rate its own buildings, so that if you're choosing to have a building be designated as a shelter after the earthquake, don't you want to know whether or not it's going to be there? And that's the type of information we need to have. If we have it and we disclose it, we're going to help everybody start down the path towards this discussion. Because the reality is very few buildings are built for functionality. Pretty much only our emergency operation centers, our hospitals, and actually at this point, City Hall is probably one of the highest rated buildings in the city because of the base isolation and the retrofit that you went through after the Northridge earthquake. So the main thing here is to focus on personal responsibility, to help people understand that the building code's role is to make sure you don't kill somebody with your building, but you have a choice about how much money you want to be invested in it. Okay, the Back to Business Inspection Program is another proposal here. And this is about the idea that we have, after the earthquake, the big earthquake, we've had the San Andreas finally goes, we could have easily 500,000 buildings, half of our buildings needing inspection. How are we going to get that done and get people back to work? And the proposal here is to allow the large corporations who already have structural engineers on staff, make an arrangement where those engineers can conduct a lot of the inspection. Yes, they will be prioritized towards the people that have paid them, but that means that we can start getting our businesses back to work. And their professional reputation, they have every incentive in the world to not give a green tag when it's not needed, because their professional reputation is at stake here. Excuse me. And the idea would be that the more we can get our big employers able to get people back to work, we can move this on. All right? And so this is something that's been done in San Francisco. It's being done in Glendale. DreamWorks already has an arrangement with Glendale's building department to get this done. Thank you. I got it here. And so this is taking on a good idea that's being seen in other cities as a way to really get our businesses back up and running after the big earthquake. The last one is what we're calling an excessive damage ordinance. This means that when you go through an earthquake and a building's been damaged, if it has a huge amount of damage, you have to repair it to up to the modern code. But if you have a smaller level of damage, you don't. You only have to repair it. You don't have to strengthen it. And the reality is, if you're getting structural damage, if the shaking isn't that high, you're a bad building that's going to be completely damaged when we have a bigger earthquake. So it's essentially, let's use the smaller earthquake shaking to identify our bad buildings in a very robust way. If it got damaged, it's bad, it's got problems. Let's require retrofitting and not just repair when we get a building in that situation. So those are the 5 recommendations on buildings. It is only one part of the report, because this is back to this idea, we're all in this together. If we're trying to create a city that's still here and working, part of what we have to do is make sure that we have infrastructure to support those people. We're going to be asking building owners to invest money. We're asking a lot of people to invest money. We've got to do our part, too, to make sure that that's a worthwhile investment. And there's a lot of things that can be done within the water system. Not many of these are coming up right now for council action, so I was going to try and wrap up quickly. I'm happy to answer any questions about this.
We have some members who do have questions. Thank you, Dr. Jones, for that. Mr. Englander.
Thank you very much. Quite possibly, this could be one of the most significant policy items before us. Not just now, but as we continue to talk about what we're going to do during our entire legislative careers and what the future holds to Los Angeles for these efforts. In 3 days, it'll be the anniversary, January 17th, of the Northridge earthquake. A 6.7 magnitude that struck at 4:31 in the morning. It killed 57 people. Attributed to 72 deaths, it injured 11,000 and left 22,000 people homeless, damaging over 114,000 residential and commercial structures. It was one of the most destructive, costliest natural disasters of our time, in its time, totaling over $41 billion. Within the first 24 hours, the fire department responded to over 2,200 incidents. 110 fires, over 100 incidents of quake-related release of hazardous materials. Residents were left without water or power for often over a week. Our transportation system was completely disrupted for months. And 3 of the 4 cities' aqueducts were damaged. So the real question is, and often that comes up, is what have we done and what's left to do? Well, I'm actually really proud of what we've done in the past. In fact, this city, the city of Los Angeles, leads by example. We have been the first in setting earthquake mitigation policies recovery protocols, and partnerships. First in the state to mandate retrofitting of unreinforced masonry buildings. That occurred back in 1981, and that was initiated by then Mr. Earthquake, Councilman Hal Bernson, and as a result saved thousands of lives during the Northridge earthquake. In addition, over the years, the City of Los Angeles has led in the charge to implement additional life and property saving measures, including mandatory retrofitting of existing tilt-up concrete wall buildings was done in 1994. Mandatory special provisions for repair of welded steel frame buildings in high earthquake damaged areas was completed and passed in 1995. Mandatory seismic gas shutoff valves, one of the first major cities in the world to do that, done in 1995 as well. Established voluntary seismic retrofit programs, developed standards which are being used by many other cities today to protect existing wood frame residential buildings with weak walls and unbolted sill plates, reinforced hillside buildings, reinforced concrete buildings, developed the Emergency Operations Organization, which we were the first of its kind to do that, established Community Emergency Response Teams, our CERT program. That was created here in Los Angeles. This is now a worldwide program. It was created by then Councilman Hal Bernson and Assistant Chief Frank Borden. We have now over 50,000 CERT-trained volunteers citywide. We modeled that FEMA, and FEMA then copied CERT and brought it all over the world. We're the first CERT team was established with 30 members out of the Devonshire Division, and also Neighborhood Watch, which was first established here in the city of Los Angeles as well. We hosted together the largest ever international earthquake conference in 2007, and then we did something which was really unique. Immediately after the earthquake conference, we took one of our own City Hall staffers out of CD12, John Blury, and lent him to Lucy Jones, Dr. Jones, to the U.S. Geological Survey for 2 years, on staff with the City of LA, working directly with USGS, and then reversed that, and we were the first ever to then bring the world-renowned expert, Dr. Jones, inside this building to work with us, and the partnership, which we now have a blueprint that was formed to work on. So what do we need to do now? Now we need to implement the mayor's blueprint plan, but we need to do so correctly. We need to do so, I believe, with a carrot and not just a stick. As Dr. Jones has said, voluntary doesn't work. Mandate will. But we've got to do so with incentives and tax incentives. We've got to create financial incentives for property owners for both tenants and landlords. On the front end of this, it's about awareness, letting homeowners and building owners know that retrofitting, although it's costly up front, it has enormous public safety, social, and financial benefits. On the back end, it's about protecting our investment in our infrastructure and critical, vulnerable buildings. For any retrofit policy to succeed, we've got to make sure that it makes financial sense. The other thing we need to do is complete the LA REX interoperability program that we've just initiated. We've spent 10 years on it, and we've just started doing that. So we have true communication systems with our first responders, and they can talk to each other.
Very good, Mitch.
And I'm going to wrap it up. And I did say at the beginning, this is probably the most important thing that we'll ever discuss. So I appreciate the extra time, Mr. President. And we're going to continue to ask Angelenos to prepare, to have a plan, and to have necessary supplies. I'll be traveling to Sacramento this week, or actually next week, with Dr. Jones as well, to talk about these plans and creating the incentives we need, the help we need with Sacramento to create those financial incentives so we can implement these plans. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your leadership. And I noticed right there, Nicole Bernson's right there standing. God bless your father for all the work that he did and started this off. And Greg Smith. And now you, Mitch. Thank you. Mr. Koretz from the 5th District.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I want to thank Dr. Jones and your team for the amazing work that you've done with this report. And I think you may have us on the track to saving hundreds or thousands of lives and maybe even the whole city, depending on how serious an earthquake we have. A lot of other areas other folks are focused on, so I want to focus on the water supply issue. If I wasn't already focused on it enough, we had a little incident in the summer which I got to witness is rather frightening, where we had a breakage of one water main and we lost 20 million gallons of water in a little over 3 hours, and just narrowly missed losing a lot of lives. So it certainly brought that more into focus for me. The question for me is, where do we focus our budget on trying to protect our water system? And my concern is that we'll focus a high percentage on protecting our aqueduct, which very well may blow up anyway, despite all the money we put into it, as opposed to prioritizing more local choices, like putting money into cleaning up our San Fernando Valley aquifer, which used to provide water for 800,000 people, and focusing on replacing some of our oldest and most brittle pipes so that in an earthquake we don't have replays of UCLA all over the city. So what do you suggest as thoughts to that, and where our priorities should be in terms of shoring up the water?
I think you bring up a very good plan and very, very good points on this, and that the right now we get 88% of our water through the aqueducts. Now, I do think, and only one of them is under direct city control. There are plans, so part of this is that the DWP has sometime this year to come to the mayor with proposals about how to deal with the aqueduct. And I think that that's very important for them to really think it through. The reality is the cost of that compared to the others is not that high. I think it's very important, since the other ones are not directly under the city's control, to at least have some. But as you point out, I mean, I think the best defense against breaking the aqueducts is to not need them. So if we can clean up the aquifer so that we are depending on local water much more and needing the aqueducts less, that's the really true resilience. So I would never want to see the aqueduct displace the aquifer actions. The reality is the aquifer is going to cost quite a bit more than the aqueduct protection, and the deal. Excuse me. The pipes are probably the most expensive, but are also probably in the end one of the most important. But again, you sort of need to do a balanced plan, and that's why the last recommendation here is this Resilience by Design program. The proposal is that there will be a focused effort at DWP at the highest levels, creating a resilience program so that everything, all of the decisions being made will be compared to what those resilience objectives are. And also asking for outside oversight. The proposal is to have a water expert, a power expert, and an earthquake expert as part of this, not oversight, but an advisory committee to make sure that the DWP is always using the best science. Because the reality is it's going to be a long slog. We have 100 years, 150 years of pipes here to deal with. And we've got to look at the long terms as getting forward. And we don't know if the earthquake's tomorrow or in 50 years. So you can't, you've got to do this in balance. So I think what I've just ended up saying is, yes, you're right. This is a complicated program, and we need to make sure that we balance out these different efforts. And of course, the other, hard reality is how fast we get it done is going to depend on how much money is put towards doing it.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to go to Mr. Labange so he can return to the chair. Mr. Labange,
Dr.
then
Jones,
we'll get back in order.
Thank you, and John Burry, thank you very much. But Dr. Jones, yes, this is a long, methodical steps we got to take. Absolutely. I remember in the 94 earthquake and in the 71 earthquake, the biggest thing we did is knock all the gargoyles off every building in town. That was the most significant thing. Then it took Mr. Burnson to do the heavy lifting for the starting of putting the brick buildings together, et cetera, et cetera. Preparedness is so key. That has to be as strong, because the earthquake could happen tomorrow. We could do a 20-year plan, but it would happen tomorrow. We got to have that preparedness. What Mr. Englander said about CERT is so key, and thank you for your leadership there. Mr. Vaughn, one of the public speakers, said, Mr. Nazarian, the fine assemblyman from the Valley, I'm going to contact him and see if we can drive that. I believe the only way we do this is get a state bond. A state bond, because the earthquake does not stop at the city limits of Los Angeles. As you know, last time in Northridge, it went all the way through up to Fillmore. and near Lake Piru and came all the way through Jefferson Park and out to Santa Monica. So it's a combination effort. But members, I think this is, as Mitch opened up and said, it's the most important thing to talk about. In the long range, it's the most important thing that affects us. When there's an emergency in the city and how the city recovers and reacts. The EWP, 3 days, power was back up throughout the city because we have a grid system around. A grid system. Power is easy to get back up, but water's underground, and that is the key. And I just wanted to say all this is extremely important. I hope, Mr. President, maybe there could be a working group of absolute departments and the appropriate committee in this council to move forward. But I will be calling for a state bond for the efforts for the housing providers. I don't like the word landlord because they make movies that say landlords are bad people. I like housing providers. And most of the housing providers in what used to be my old district, the Wilshire district, are couples who own the houses, the buildings there in that corridor. So I thank you again, Dr. Jones. Dr. Jones, do you have any questions of me?
Mr. O'Farrell.
Don't let this drop.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dr. Jones, thank you so much for this risk reduction presentation. I look forward to your additional ones addressing so much. I would say that of all of the policy decisions weighing on us, this is the one that should have the most sense of urgency, the greatest sense of urgency of anything we're currently contemplating. So I'm all for that. I have a question for you in relation to retrofitting buildings that are occupied. Some of the new technologies that I've seen seem encouraging to me, but I'd like to know your opinions and thoughts of the possibilities based on some of these new technologies, these new applications. That do you feel that any of these new products on the scene hold any promise that would enable people to continue living in their buildings while they're applied, concrete and otherwise?
Okay, well, there's two different things. There's the soft first story buildings and there's the concrete. In the soft first story, we don't think we're going to have to displace tenants. Because the primary problems on the first floor, that's almost all the parking. And there are some really great new products that are available that allow quite easy sort of slot in. They're essentially modular walls that would be replacing those poles. And they're really quite narrow. The other advantage of them is we lose less parking space because they're really pretty small and they're very cost effective. I mean, our estimate is that it's only something like 3 to 6 months worth of rent to retrofit in the soft first story, and you don't have to displace the tenants while that's going on. So that part all looks where the new technology is really helping. As I said, the concrete buildings, the whole thing is just a whole lot more complicated. It's a lot more individual. It does appear that some of these new technologies really are making a difference. The big question is whether or not you can accomplish it. You pretty much have to move out the tenants because you've got to get down to the core of the building. And but in it looks like some of the situations you can just do it floor by floor, so you don't have to kick out everybody at the same time, which would be presumably a pretty big deal. The other thing is that it was also very clear, by far the most cost-effective way of doing it is together with modernization of the building. And I think that that's a really big issue. We've seen this a couple of times where people go in and modernize the building when doing the earthquake retrofit would have only added $10 a square foot. When they're already spending $200 a square foot to go and redo everything else, you don't do the earthquake retrofit then. It's a pretty crazy investment scheme. And so anything that can be done to make it easier for them to do an energy retrofit together with the earthquake retrofit would, I think, be a big advantage to the city because, the sustainability aspects of them getting those energy upgrades as well. And it's so much more cost effective because a big chunk of the cost is getting down to the core of the building. You add on the electric, you add on the earthquake at the same time. That base cost is already covered.
Terrific. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Farrell. Mr. Blumenfeld from the 3rd District.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And thank you so much, Dr. Jones, for the hard work that you've put in on this. Years of experience, years of work, and as my colleagues are saying, and I certainly agree, this is a monumental. This issue is of a monumental importance. I wanted to touch on two different areas. One, to go with what you were just talking about, which is the financing element of it, and how it doesn't make sense not to do some of the financing when we're doing energy retrofits or other types of retrofits. It makes a lot of sense to me. And you know, I don't think there's any question that the benefits outweigh the costs in terms of doing this retrofit. What we've heard from folks today is how do you finance this? And so it's not a question of if it should be done. We all know it should be done. It's a question of financing. And as you and I have met and talked about this a lot, there are ways to finance this. One way fits nicely with the energy retrofitting and has to do with the PACE program. The Property Assessed Clean Energy Program, which is something I was very involved with as we've talked about in some legislation I had at the state in 2009 to extend that to water conservation. But you can also use it for earthquake retrofit. Right. And in fact, per our conversation, I've introduced a motion today to specifically engage the city in the PACE program when it comes to earthquake retrofits. So what this means is it takes that big issue of how you finance it, and it puts a practical element of it so that folks can finance it over time. It can be on their property taxes. There can be a way to appropriately pass it through and to get it done. This isn't rocket science. You've done the rocket science in terms of letting us know what the goalposts are. Now it's up to us around this horseshoe to figure out how do we get to those goalposts. And when we can reduce a problem to a financing mechanism, we can figure that out. That's not rocket science. That's financing, and there are ways to do it. And the motion before us that we've introduced today is one way to get us forward on that. So I'm very excited about that. And the goalposts that you've put in. The other piece I wanted to mention was I was surprised and pleased by the emphasis that your report put on the communications aspect of things. And it fits in very nicely with the work that I've been doing on trying to move us forward on broadband and Wi-Fi throughout the city. But it adds a whole other level of importance to that. In the past, we were looking at this, and I was looking at this mostly as an issue of digital divide, mostly as an issue of economic competitiveness and making LA a premier city. But what this report points out is having that connectivity and having some sort of ubiquitous Wi-Fi is essential for resiliency and for preparedness. So I was pleasantly surprised by that, and it was sort of an epiphany for me to realize that how much that dovetails to the work that we're already doing on that, and the fact that we have an RFP coming out in March on that very issue. And so we'll work closely with you on that and on getting the cell towers to be appropriately fortified and some of those other communications issues that I'll deal with as the Information Technology Committee. But I really wanted to thank you again. You've forced us to do something difficult, which is look at the ugly truth of that we are not as prepared as we need to be, that our standards aren't what they need to be if we want to be a functional city after the earthquake happens. And so by providing that roadmap, we can now get us on the road to become more functional. So thank you so much for the hard work that you've done. And I know that you're going to continue to do in different capacities and working with all of us around this horseshoe to really put the fine points on this and make sensible laws that are practical that can help implement this. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll comment. I didn't quite. There is a whole section on telecommunications, as Mr. Blumenfield was saying, and again, it details in the report. We can't get through all of it now, but I want to be able to be here as a resource for all of you. I mean, I spent a year looking at these issues and details and hearing the opinions of a lot of people, and my job is to give you the science to say what the results of your decisions are, but I've got a lot of information to help support you in that. So I want to be able to continue to support this effort, even though my year with the mayor's office is completed. I don't want to see this dropped.
Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Parks of the 8th District.
Thank you very much. So I also want to stand and say thank you for the comprehensive report. Many ideas about the infrastructure generally do not come into light when we're talking about earthquakes, generally looking at the immediate problem of the structure. There's a couple of things I'd like to get an idea on. You mentioned we've had a voluntary retrofit program for, 10 to 20 years?
They were immediately after Northridge within those first few years, yeah.
From your research, is it clear whether there's a lack of information from building owners, whether concrete apartments, that these issues do not exist in their buildings? Is that an educational program, or is it knowledge and just been ignored?
I think it's back to this issue that the impact, the cost on the individual is large, and they can gamble that the earthquake isn't going to happen. And the problem for the city is we have to average it over all those owners, and the gamble starts, and the costs of not doing it really end up with the rest of us. There's actually some very specific data out of URM, the unreinforced masonry laws, where about half of the California jurisdictions have had
Ms.
mandatory
Jones, Sergeant.
programs.
Could continue.
Okay, and then half of them have had voluntary programs, and 90% of the buildings in the mandatory programs have been retrofitted, and 20% in the voluntary programs. So even when the knowledge of just how bad the building is very clear, if you don't have to, it's always something that you can put off.
I think you hit my point, is that people are gambling on other people's lives.
Exactly.
Generally. And they're also gambling on the city's infrastructure, which they would not be responsible if it tore up our sewers, our streets, our sidewalks, our water lines. And I think this is where I'm concerned about when I see the disparity between 5 years for apartment buildings, 30 years for concrete building. From what I can see, the potential danger of loss of life and major destruction is more in the concrete buildings, as opposed to, even though there's significantly more apartment buildings, the real damage could be done where the concrete buildings are.
They're both very deadly buildings. It's concrete. It's concentrated in a fewer number of buildings, and they tend to be bigger. The reason behind the disparity is the disparity in cost.
I understand it, but I think that's where we have to get over that hump, because, as we say in the commercials, life is priceless. All right, and so how many dollars do you put on losing 100 people, or if a concrete building collapsed, that's a multi-use building that we have people shopping there and living there, what is the cost of that in the overall scheme? The other concern I have in the sense of liability, we've been put on notice by you and a variety of people that these problems exist. It would appear the longer it takes us to mandate and move forward, then the more we absorb the liability of the property owner by not forcing them to do it. And it seems like our liability keeps growing, and while others talk about the cost. And our liability is foremost as it relates to 4 million people that live in the city and the people who travel and all that infrastructure that they have to be on. Now, why would we assume the added cost of being put on notice about buildings that are subpar and allow them to continue and say, if earthquakes were ordered like pizzas, we can say, hey, let's have one today and let's go to that building, but we don't have that ability. So that's what I'm concerned about, is that every time we throw cost in, it's kind of like a red herring that makes the discussion take off on another tangent, when we should be focusing on how do we get the buildings done and how do we ensure that the city's infrastructure does not get torn up while it's being done. And that's what I'm concerned about, that yes, it is costly, but every person that invests in a property in the city of LA knows it's costly. When you buy it, you wouldn't call us about putting a roof on. You wouldn't call us about, if in building and safety certainly would not allow major zoning problems or defects in the buildings to exist, whether it's in the parking lot, non-earthquake related or anything else, and say, take 30 years to fix it. Right. They would red tag it, close it down, and say it's unsafe. And I don't think we can deviate from that process and then wait for the tragedy and say, oh, we only lost 200 people today. One thing I was wondering, and you kind of mentioned it on one issue. Do we have enough resources as far as engineers and craftsmen to actually do this kind of work in a shorter period of time?
Well, that is one of the issues that was in there, because the shorter we make it, the more likely we're going to create a demand surge, that the cost will go up because there's a limited number of people. And part of a lot of the project work, I worked with the Structural Engineers Association of Southern California, and they are looking at how to set up training programs to make sure that they have an adequate number of people ready to do those evaluations. And I think it's something where we can also potentially turn to the federal government, because FEMA works a lot with the structural engineers, and I think, you know, making sure we have enough engineers would be something that fits within their guidelines and their mission.
Okay. The last couple of things I was going to ask you, in this process, is there any consideration, and when we saw it in our REAP program, when people were inundated with violations, they ended up mysteriously selling the building. Are there safeguards that these buildings don't get traded around to where it takes years to figure out who owns them, who's responsible, or if it's going to be sold, that the retrofit be done prior to the sale, or that the owner is notified that this in the sale?
Well, those are the sort of things that are actually, I think, in your sphere, right? Of how much to make sure those are, you know, what actually goes into the ordinance would be on that. I know that we looked at making sure that the selling it wouldn't change the time frame, right? So that the time frame would be geared by getting the letter from Department of Building and Safety, and then you're on track from there on out. And if you sold it, that wouldn't change it. I know there was also discussion of trying to make it be that if someone wanted to, assuming it's not a historic building, wanted to tear it down and replace it with a new one, that is pretty clearly to the city's benefit, because a retrofit just is never as good as a new building. And so that they wanted to make sure that that would be encouraged in the process.
And then my final thing, I don't know if you've given any research, but when we've done in the past on some issues dealing with subsidy, it always came up as a legal issue of whether you can subsidize certain groups versus others using funds belonging to the general public for the specific use of somebody's private benefit. And whether we ran into that when we dealt with the trash fees, that people were suing because they found that we were subsidizing single-family homes by giving them free trash service while making commercial service pay for it. Right. I'm just wondering whether that's been discussed as we talk about bonds and things like that. Are there any legal limitations as far as subsidizing private business?
It didn't come up, so I'm not sure, but it's not an issue that got raised as a red flag within the process.
Can I give you that red flag?
What?
Can I give you that red flag?
I will.
Thank you.
Members, thank you very much. That was good discussion. Dr. Jones, thank you.
Thank you.
Interesting enough, there's two side points that are components of ours. Our field people who work with the CERT aspect, and our planning and land use who works closely with building and safety. Much more work is needed to be done. I want to thank you for this presentation. To note that, Mr. Bury and the Deputy Mayor, if you could get to the next meeting. I do have cards for the record. I will call. But thank you, Dr. Jones, very much. Give Dr. Jones a better hand for that there, everybody. This could be noted if you would want. Mr. Parks.
Can I just ask, interrupt you there, on 1K today, can we reconsider it and continue it for 2 weeks? The person just showed up.
Okay, for reconsideration on that 1K. Open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
12 ayes. And take the cards and note it when it's scheduled again. If the people here, they can fill it out. Thank you. 1K has been continued 2 weeks. Thank you, Mr. Parks. Thank you. Next will be this item that we still have before us on the presentation. Beverly Kenworthy. We note Ms. Kenworthy. Ms. Kenworthy, thank you.
Beverly Kenworthy with the California Apartment Association of Los Angeles. I'd like to thank Dr. Jones, the mayor's office, and team for the work they've done on this. The California Apartment Association is not opposed to the mandate. We've heard reasons why we need the mandate. The mandate is one thing, compliance is another, and I think many of you have spoken about it quite eloquently. I don't think I've heard from anybody today that I have not agreed with. Landlords have serious concerns about raising this capital. Tenants have legitimate concerns about some of them being able to shoulder pass-through costs. There's a lot of details to work out, but I think, as we know, we have to do it. Our organization was instrumental in working in San Francisco to get this done, which we did, and we were able to support their efforts there. We commit to do the same here and work with you and bring our members in who know how to do this stuff, who know what it takes. Financing is going to be key, because what we want is compliance. We want to save people's lives and tenants, and I also like to point out that we are below we do not have enough housing to meet demand, and we do not want to place an extra burden on that, because if landlords can't comply, this is not good for them and it's not good for their tenants, and we can't risk the loss of housing while we do this. So I'd like us to keep all of those things in mind as we look towards a solution that works for everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Arnie Carlin. Note the file there. Carlos Aguilar.
Good morning. My name is Carlos Aguilar. I'm with the Coalition for Economic Survival. And we support the health and safety of the renters of the city of Los Angeles. We also support the seismic retrofit, but in a city that has a large portion that is severely rent burdened, the cost cannot only rest on the back of tenants. We commend the efforts to prevent earthquake disasters, but we're concerned that rent increases on middle, moderate, and low-income tenants will result in an economic earthquake. We urge funding sources be found to alleviate the burden on property owners and tenants, or that at least a shared cost mechanism be found. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Diaz. Steve Diaz, note the card. Francesca De La Rosa. Francesca De La Rosa, note the card. Erwin Warshaw. Erwin Warshaw.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. President and members of the council, those who are still here. My name is Erwin Zeke Warsaw, and I'm a realtor in Paradise and a former Los Angeles County deputy assessor and a member of the Fair Housing Council. And I'd like to just focus on the allocation of the retrofitting. I would like to propose a blue ribbon commission associated with any ordinance that might be enacted, and that this commission should be comprised of an equal number of landlord and tenants, with the task of recommending a fair and equitable plan to allocate any and all of the earthquake retrofitting costs that Dr. Jones's report might be assessed to all of these rental buildings in the city of Los Angeles. The reason for my proposal is that I have a concern that any future enacted earthquake costs should not be unilaterally placed upon the shoulders of property owners, and I would like to volunteer myself to serve on any commission or committee if requested. And thank you for the opportunity of addressing the council on this very important economic and public safety matter, which I think is crucial to everybody who lives in the city. Thank you.
Jim Clark. Jim Clark, note to file. Elizabeth Rosales. Elizabeth here? Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Lisette Anaud Rosales. I'm with Strategic Actions for a Just Economy. I was here with about a dozen community activists and community residents that had concern for the 100% pass-through to tenants as currently proposed. As you are well aware, LA is a renter city with about 62% of housing units renter-occupied, according to the 2010 census. In addition, LA is also the least affordable rental market in the country, with 60% of households paying over 30% of their income in rent, making them cost-burn. Our families need relief from exorbitant housing prices, not an increase that will continue to shrink the small amount of funds they have for healthy food and health care. We are concerned because there has also not been an analysis of where the burden will be most felt. As you're aware, South LA, for example, has some of the oldest housing stock in the city. And we need to analyze what that disproportionate impact will be on low-income communities and communities of color. So we urge you not to pass any proposal until the serious matter is adequately addressed so that our hardworking families do not bear the burden of this program. Thank you.
Chantel Martell from the Thai community. Note to file. Thank you very much. Mr. Herman. You have 1 minute, Mr. Herman.
Well, isn't it very obvious that Lucy Jones was not prepared in her discussion to consider the cost affecting the gentrification of all those Angelenos, all you taxpayers who are going to be impacted by the vulnerability and the aftermath? So I conclude, and I'm opposed. I'm in agreement with the majority of people on item 13 who have been speaking clearly and loudly that you must put a hold on this item until consideration of all information is considered. The state has the opportunity to make these changes. Now, let me just give you a little advice. If you have insurance on your building, what the hell? You don't need it. Just get FEMA. As long as you don't have insurance, FEMA will recover everything and you can live in a motorhome until the state and the federal government pays and fixes and retrofits your home and building. Thank you.
Elsa Cajola. Elsa. Note to file. Thelma Perez. Thelma Perez. Note to file. That completes the cards for this item. Thank you. Next item, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, that brings council to general public comment.
Thank you. Brenda Lee. Brenda Lee.
Hi, my name is Brenda Lee. I was told to come back in 2 weeks. My case would be continued, but I wasn't given a date. And I'd also like a voucher because I've been here twice already, and I'd really like to get this resolved today if I could.
January 28th, the clerk just informed me.
January 28th?
Mr. Clerk?
2 weeks is January 28th, sir.
Okay, can I get a... What time are we coming in? Can we get a voucher?
We can help you over at the side right there. And you're Mr. Lee?
Yeah.
You can note the card there, too. The date is January 28th. We'll get the information. And, Mr. Clerk, could you get the correct address, Mr. Clerk, for the Lee family here?
For the property that they own, that would be item K on today's
Got it. So
agenda.
January 28th.
January 28th?
Yes. Is that correct, Mr. Clerk?
January 28, and the address 28. The address is 825 West 106th Street.
Correct.
Thank you. Very good. The deputy for Mr. Parks is there to assist you. Thank you. Sean Murphy from St. Charles, Toluca Lake, California.
Yeah, Bob Holmes' house is up for sale again. They're selling it for $23. Oh, we got $23 on you. Our new streets need to be fixed. Our sidewalks need to be repaired. Krikorian's going to get reelected. I'm going to reelect Krikorian. And I almost jumped the gun last week about the new president of the city council. She has to win the elections to win the city council. So that's it. When I'm talking, I don't need somebody telling me to I don't need anybody to stay on the subject. You keep it up, I'm going to file suit.
Wayne Spindler.
Thank you. 1 minute of time, I mean, it's just too much time to work with, so I'll try to make it fast because I just have so many things to say. But I noticed that there's people paying these liens, and they have a receipt for the lien being paid, and yet the city is not recording a satisfaction of judgment of the lien. And they're recording and implementing more interest onto these liens. And this has like happened 3 times a day that I've seen. Is this a new way to raise money? Now, get on it. They pay it, cancel it, take it down and record it with county, or they're going to, when they refinance their house, they're going to pay thousands of dollars in money that they need to feed their families. Please do this. This is not good. 3, 2, 1, touchdown.
Darrell Gale.
Good afternoon, City Council. I'm Darrell Gale, environmental advocate. I want to talk today about New Year's resolutions. It is still not too late to make your New Year's resolution, and it'll be your environmental resolution. We have it so good here in Los Angeles with our beautiful year-round weather, our gorgeous mountains, our spectacular beaches and coastlines. So for those of us who really want to keep LA the iconic, beautiful city it is, let's do our part to keep it pristine and as beautiful as possible. Let us set an example to our families, our churches, offices, and our social groups, a challenge to everyone to cut down on our auto trips, plane trips, practice radical recycling, and everyone can conserve the precious amount of water that we have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Herman. Sergeant, will you report? Sergeant, report.
The aftermath of today's tragic events is this: we can't hold the Special Olympics unless the infrastructure of this city and the compliance of this city and the administrators who conduct the business for the Special Olympics resort to making our sidewalks and streets accessible and safe for all our Olympians. And by the way, we lost the Olympics due to your inability and your capability of effectuating a matter of principle in this city, which is this: the safety of your constituents has how long been waiting for you to take an action. We had a problem in Hollywood yesterday, a bomb threat, we were not safe. And I really hope Mr. Englander back there is listening, because a part of his district was involved in this. So in closing argument, I say reach out and do something for your constituents. Thank you.
Henry Marine.
Yes, as you know, money sheltered from the pay of Hacklin Cola employees was loaned to union hiring halls and placed in trusts for the benefit of Hacklin Cola employees, under the guise that these employees were not Hacklin Cola employees, but employees of union contractors. Consequently, every cent placed in account number 1120 by the taxpayers of LA is now sitting in union trust accounts, not drawing a penny of interest, and not 1 cent of the principal has been returned to the employee or to the official benefit administrators of the city and ACLA, which is CalPERS and Lacers. Now, it's time for y'all to go obtain that money with 90-day written notice to turn it back. Thank you.
Juan Alcala.
A society of free people where you get harassed for wearing a hat. Johnson, quit harassing us, will you? We don't need these Nazi cops after us. You know the protests across the street? I should have stayed there because they're protesting against cop killers. Killer cops, not cop killers. Yeah, killer cops. There's a lot of them going on right now. It's an epidemic. Yesterday or the day before in Montana, this cop was crying because he killed a guy on television, and then he realized that the guy didn't even have any weapons. And the cop actually broke down and cried. See, we cannot have a society like this. I wasn't even going to talk about cops. I was going to talk about housing, but you assholes put me down to 1 minute.
John Walsh is our final speaker today.
Got me down to 1 minute.
I can't breathe. Go to the website. The most blasphemous cartoon with Muhammad in it appears on at J. Walsh Confidential. No one will touch this one. It's published here. Okay, so when I mistakenly said Lucy Jones wasn't here, you jumped on me and corrected me, although you're not supposed to correct me. When I said that Glenn Dake, that you just were about to appoint to the MWD, a paid position, was the mayor's long-standing gay lover, nobody corrected me because there isn't a person in this room that doesn't know that he's been together with him for 15 or 16 years. And I say, I was told by Visar Tomasian all the details. She was a deputy who was fired when Glenn Dake went, when the mayor was was in the council, and got Visar Tomasian fired. HollywoodHighlands.org.
That is public comment. Public comment is just that. Mr. City Attorney, for the record, explain what public comment is to the microphone for our viewers on Channel 35.
It's an opportunity for people to speak on matters within the jurisdiction of the City of Los Angeles.
And whatever their beliefs may be, true or not. Thank you very much. I had to say that. Thank you very much. Members, any announcements now, Mr. Clerk, right? We completed a task?
Yes, sir.
Motions for referral?
Posting and referral, yes, sir.
Any announcements, members?
That's clear.
And no announcements, any adjourning motions? All rise. Call on Mr. Price of the 9th District. At this time, please all rise in reverence to those who went before us. Mr. Price.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've got two this morning. The first is for Ruby Lee Walker, born in August 31st, 1938. She was the first child of 4 children. When she was a little girl, the family moved to L.A. She attended Carver Junior High and Thomas Jefferson High School, all in the 9th District. She married early and became Mrs. Ruby Lee Mellon and had her first child, Yolanda. Her family soon grew with the births of Andrew, Ronald, Derek, and Vivian. Ruby became separated from her husband and took on the challenge of raising her children as a single mom. They lived in and around South Los Angeles, where she was known to friends and family for her likable personality and charming smile. Ruby took pride in the fact that all 5 of her children went on to have successful lives and beautiful families. She cherished all of her grandchildren, nieces, nephews, friends, all of them constantly visiting her, flooding her with laughter, love, especially around the holidays. In the last few years of her life, she made a habit of calling all of her children daily at a particular time, and when the phone rang at that time, they knew it was Ruby. Although all the family cared for her, it should be noted that Ruby's son-in-law, Larry Webster Sr., played a special role in her daily care. At 76 years old and in the home of her daughter, Vivian, she left us on January the 3rd, 2015. That morning before she passed, it was reported that she was feeling fine and in her own special way. Ruby was the last for a generation, having been preceded in death by her parents, Elmo and Honey, her siblings, Dorothy, Earl, and Rosie. She is survived by all 5 of her children and a host of family and friends. I also ask members that we adjourn in the memory of Fred Jones of Washington, D.C., who passed away peacefully in his sleep on Tuesday morning, December 22nd, 2014, after a long illness. He was the father of our Assemblyman, Reginald Jones Sawyer. Fred Jones spent his childhood in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He joined the Air Force at a young age and was honorably discharged. He was an entrepreneur at an early age, shining shoes before he was 8, but eventually owned his own business and became a community legend in southeast Washington, D.C. He was also taught and had a hand in teaching many of the African-American barbers and hairstylists in the Washington, D.C. area during his time. He even taught at local institutions of incarceration and would bring in the homeless and give them free haircuts. He was extremely proud of his 4 children, Assemblyman Reginald Jones Sawyer, Reggie Jones of Washington, D.C., Amy Jones of Maryland, and Dr. Fred Jones of West Virginia. He's also survived by his sister, Loretta Jones, his grandchildren, and a host of nieces, nephews, and friends. He was laid to rest January 3rd, 2015, in Washington, D.C., in Arlington National Cemetery, and we hope that the Lord will favorably review both. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Parks.
Thank you. I'd ask that we adjourn in memory of Myrtle Faye Rump, who passed away January 7, 2015. She was born February 1931 in Chisholm, Texas. She was the 5th of 10 children born to Reverend Enoch and Dale Ross. She worked as an independent seamstress for many years as a single parent in Watts, where she lived in the Imperial Courts housing projects with her 3 children. She witnessed the beginning of the Watts riot in '65, which occurred across from her business at 103rd and Central. 2 months later, she married her husband, Harris Rump, and moved to a home in South L.A. The couple owned and operated several businesses, including a lawn service, coin-operated laundry, and a 28-unit apartment. She founded the Al Wooten Jr. Heritage Center in 1990 in South L.A. and named it after her son, who was unfortunately killed in a drive-by shooting. 20 years later, in 2010, President Barack Obama presented her with one of 13 Presidential Citizen Medals, our nation's second highest civilian honor, for her work providing education and recreation for more than 5,000 youth from grades 3 to 12. She's survived by her son, Dr. Arthur Wooten, her daughter, Barbara Clark, and a host of family members. Her service will be held Friday, January 16th, 11 a.m. at Faithful Central Bible Church.
Mr. Koretz.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to adjourn in memory of Rabbi Leonard Bierman, the legendary founding rabbi of Leo Beck Temple, who passed away this past December at the age of 93. He was born in Pennsylvania in 1921. He was a U.S. Marine in the Second World War, and having gone to Jerusalem for rabbinical studies, he became a member of the famed Jewish self-defense underground organization, Haganah, in the 1948 War of Independence. He would emerge as one of our great champions of social justice and pacifism. He called for an end to the nuclear arms race, opposed the war in Vietnam, as well as other later wars, and worked steadfastly with Muslims and Christians to seek peace in the Middle East. He was an implacable foe to racism, intolerance, and discrimination, including as far back as the 1940s, when as a rabbinical student in Cincinnati, he joined with other students in actions aimed at ending the segregated practices of that city's restaurants. He moved to LA in 1949, and here he founded Leo Beck Temple, which is now located near the Getty, but first it met in an Episcopal church on the west side. He marched many times for civil rights for African Americans, advocated for economic justice for farm workers and hotel workers, and was involved in many other progressive causes. I recollect him being very involved also in Tom Bradley's groundbreaking race for mayor of Los Angeles. The Jewish Journal quoted Rabbi Bierman as saying, "I had left rabbinical school with the conviction that a humane society was just around the corner and that the wrongs and injustices of history would be corrected or could be corrected, and drawing inspiration from the great ethical ideas of the Jewish tradition, that we Jews could be instruments in the creation of such a world." He was a giant of a rabbi because of this kind of wisdom and because of his great humility. He is survived by his loving wife, Joan, his devoted children, Judith and Neil Hanlon, Eve Bierman, Elizabeth and Lou Rothbard, Alara Willens, and Scott and Marina Willens, and grandchildren Matthew and Emma, Emily, Michael, Leo, and Evan Willens, and his sister Helene and brother Jack. His memory will always be treasured by his congregation, his countless friends, and our city of Los Angeles.
Thank you, Mr. Koretz. Mr. Bruce Caino.
Thank you, colleagues. I ask that we adjourn in memory of Ciro Amalfitano, better known as Jerry. He was born on February 18th, 1950 in San Pedro. He attended Firmas and La Suena High School and later attended Loyola Marymount University, where he was a star oarsman on the rowing team. He was a dedicated and motivated coach to the Loyola rowing teams long after graduating college. For more than 35 years, Jerry influenced the lives of many while working as a civil engineer and project manager for Southern California Edison. One of Jerry's proudest achievements was establishing the Fields of Dreams soccer park, which is home to thousands of AYSO players in San Pedro. He was an avid learner, but more so he was an inspirational mentor. He lived with the notion of being the best that you can be. Jerry's big smile and hearty laugh could light up a room. He was incredibly proud of his Italian heritage, and he was a true family man. He loved nothing more than being around his family at dinner table as laughter and stories were shared. Jerry passed away surrounded by his family and love on the evening of January 10th, 2015. Some of Jerry's last words to his loved ones were, "Thank you all for being my family." He is survived by his daughter Natalie, son Vincent, fiancée Susan Schaefer, and sisters Frances Flett and Anna Hill, as well as many more family members, friends, and colleagues. Visitation will be held on Thursday at Green Hills from 3 to 8. Funeral services will be held this Friday at Mary Star at 9 a.m. in lieu of flowers. Donations can be made to the Johnson Comprehensive Cancer Center in care of Dr. Schiller or Loyola Marymount University Rowing Association in honor of Jerry Amalfitano. May Jerry Amalfitano rest in peace. Thank you.
Beautiful family, Amalfitano family from San Pedro. Very special. Members, I ask we adjourn in memory of Mike Carrion. He was a 94-year-old man, lived a great long life. A 1938 graduate of John Marshall High School. And later on in the years, he got involved with the Alumni Association, and he was able to raise about $85,000 to restore the old auditorium in the school. He was much loved. He survived by members of his family, including his children, his son, daughter, and grandchildren, as well as his sister, Nina Caron, who was instrumental in saving the building from destruction in 1971. I ask we adjourn in memory of Mike Caron. Also, we should note that Al Martinez, the columnist for the Los Angeles Times and the Daily News, but longtime Los Angeles Times, a wonderful man who covered the color of the people of Los Angeles, their lives, what they did, whatever their range was. He grew up in Oakland, came here in 1971, was an impactful player because when you read about the people of Los Angeles in the metropolitan newspaper, like the Times, it inspires others. And he was loved, much loved by his family. I ask we adjourn in memory of Al Martinez, the great columnist who decaded Southern California life for 30 years. So this is the day we move forward. We've completed our meeting. Go serve the city well. And just before you move, I see a hand raised here. Mr. Cedillo, excuse me.
Am I on? Let us adjourn in memory of Sylvia Jewel Johnson, born September 25th, 1936, a real Angelino. Attended Hooper, Carver, and then Jefferson High. had a scholarship to go to UCLA, but chose to go to SC for some reason. Who knows why? But she graduated, a degree in sociology, then left, went to go work at the Department of Public Social Services, where she met her husband. She met her husband. She was working next to him in one of those cubicles, and she met her husband, who she loved and adored, and who she'd spend the rest of his life with. She then went on to become appointed by Governor Jerry Brown to the CIW, the California Institute for Women. Later on, went on to work for the probation department of San Bernardino, and ultimately went on to become the chief probation officer and the first African American and first woman to hold that position in the county of Alameda County. She was an innovator. She was progressive. She was very skilled. She won a lot of awards and grants for creating very specific niche type programming to help juvenile offenders, women offenders. She was a visionary. She led and mentored hundreds of employees. She was a sister friend, a mentor, a motivator, a confidant. She had tremendous style and panache. She loved her husband incredibly. And then, of course, the apple never falls far from the tree. She had an incredible daughter named Holly Mitchell, who serves us now in the state Senate. And I've had the privilege and honor of working with Holly for over 3 decades. And she's an incredible leader and champion for the poor. She's survived by Holly, her grandson Ryan Mitchell, her cousins Danny Jones and Clarence Banks, and a host of lifelong friends who are indebted to her for her incredible friendship and leadership in the city and the state. May she rest in peace.
Thank you, Mr. Zedillo. Members, seeing no other adjourning motions that serve the city well, thank you all for your participation, especially the clerks, city attorney, and Kenny on the sound.